Hello and welcome to episode 295 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly podcast of many topics. And we do have a topic today, but I'm so hesitant to introduce it that I'm just going to introduce the panel first. With me today is Peter Triezenberg.
Hi, everybody.
And Alana Hagues.
Hey.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hi there.
And Eva Padilla.
Here we go.
Alana, Peters, Zach, Eva. 5 years ago, in the summer of 2016, we did 2 episodes called The Essential 10 that were basically 4 of us Retro Encounter panelists arguing our way into an official podcast top 10. We used the adjective essential, but really it was a list of bests, favorites, recommendations, just sort of our own weird list of 10 that is sort of the Retro Encounter RPG Hall of Fame. And it was a slightly stressful recording. Like some of the arguing got a little heated. I'm not thrilled with how with how like annoyed I got with some of our panelists in that episode. Basically everyone besides Marcos. But it was a popular episode. People still mention it to me when I interact with listeners and other staff. So we decided that on its 5-year almost anniversary, it was time to bring it back. This is the Essential Ten-2. We are going to try and make another top 10 list for Retro Encounter. It is not ranked. It is not very specific, but it is our top 10 favorites, top 10 recommendations, top 10 essential games. But this isn't exactly going to be the same as 5 years ago. All 4 of you have listened to the old episodes and know mostly what you're getting into. Peter, you were there with me 5 years ago, weren't you?
Mike, for some reason this leave call button isn't working. But yes, I was on the original Essential 10. I'm here I'm here of my own free will, and I'm excited to participate.
I think, Zach, you were a listener of the podcast before joining
Sure
RPG Fan. So did you listen to Essential 10 in the moment, or maybe a little bit after it aired?
It was basically as they were coming on. It was a time. I mean, it's certainly, I think, maybe the most distinct episodes of Retro Encounter. There's nothing quite like
choice word.
Yeah, and like podcast episodes that rank things or argue a lot are certainly not unusual, but it's not really what we do in Retro Encounter. So it was pretty unusual for what we are. It started out with Josh wanting to make a list of of like determining what the best RPG of all time was, and I didn't like that idea at all. And so he and I argued back and forth a little bit, and we sort of ended up making it an unranked top 10 was our compromise. Eva, you were also a listener of RPG Fans podcast before joining. Mm-hmm. Did you listen to Essential 10 before around when it came out, maybe?
Oh, I sure did. I think that's for some of you. I don't think I've ever heard y'all so exasperated by the end of it.
Yeah, by the end of it, I just wanted it to be over by the end of it. So I probably just agreed to some stuff that I wasn't planning on agreeing to.
Hey, it happens.
I mean, you like Kingdom Hearts on the list, so you must have.
And remarkably, the Kingdom Hearts isn't on this year's list, so I'm actually feeling a little bit, less exasperated than I did maybe going into part 2 5 years ago.
Consider this mercy.
So Alana, I think you've told me that you have listened to that episode. Is there any takeaway from it that you're at least is in the back of your mind going into these episodes, and any strategizing, any worries, any hopes?
I'm pretty passive, so I don't really know what I'm doing here, first of all. Like, I don't have any particular strategy. I hope it doesn't turn into a bloodbath, because that's not my thing, but I'll do my best.
Okay, maybe it won't be a bloodbath, but maybe it will be Bloodborne, because that is one game in our list of 35 here. That was one of the weaker transitions I've ever made on this podcast, but now I have to live in my shame. But okay, listeners, this is how it went 5 years ago, and this is how it's going again this time. I'm just gonna lay out a few ground rules, a few base expectations. Each of us made a top 10 list to submit for the podcast independently of one another, and then when we combined them together, there was some overlap, so we ended up at a list of 35 games. So these 35 games we eventually have to get to a list of 10 for our special Essential 10 Retro Encounter Hall of Fame or what have you. And so from this list of 35, we're going to take turns making cuts and locks, basically removing games from consideration and then moving them forward to our second recording, which will be next week, of course. So after 2 rounds of cuts and locks, that'll basically lock 10 and cut 10. Our list of 35 will become a list of 15. And then we will spend the last part of this episode getting that list of 15 to a list of 10 through an unruly, no-holds-barred set of arguments to sort of cut those final 5 games. But during this process, in those first 2 rounds of cuts, if someone on the panel has a major problem with a cut that is taking place, they may veto that cut, but every panelist has only 1 veto, and the vetoes can only be used in those first 2 rounds of cutting. At the end of this episode, that'll give us a list of 20, and in part 2, we will get that list of 20 down to a list of 10. But let's see, is there anything else I haven't mentioned? Oh, right. I forgot to say that the original Essential 10 from 2016 are out of consideration. Those cannot be removed from the Essential 10. They are not part of this round of voting. They are permanently enshrined in the Retro Encounter Essential 10, and thus are not up for consideration. So do not feel bad if you don't hear us argue about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Chrono Trigger, Diablo 3, Final Fantasy 6, Kingdom Hearts, Mass Effect 2, 999, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, Persona 4, Steambot Chronicles, or Xenoblade Chronicles, because those 10 aren't going anywhere. But we do have 35 more games to consider. So before we begin cutting, locking, vetoing, arguing, possibly ending friendships that have lasted multiple years, are we ready to hear the official 35 contenders?
Let's hear it.
Okay. I'll try to employ my old speed-speaking skills from that I was honing many years ago and read them down in semi-alphabetical order. Bloodborne, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, Dark Souls 3, Disco Elysium, Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Quest XI, Earthbound, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy XIV, Lunar the Silver Star, Lunar 2 Eternal Blue, Mother 3, Nier Automata, Okami, Persona 5 Royal, Phantasy Star 4, Pokemon Black and White, Shadow Hearts, Skies of Arcadia, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, Stardew Valley, Suikoden 2, Tales of the Abyss, Tales in the Sky First Chapter, Tales in the Sky Second Chapter, Transistor, Undertale, Vagrant Story, The Witcher 3, The World Ends With You, Yakuza 0, Zelda, A Link to the Past, Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's 35 games, and we will be discussing them over the past, hopefully, less than 2 hours and 35 minutes. All right, we didn't really determine an order before recording, so I'll just go with the order that we had in the Google Doc, with the cuts going alphabetically and then the locks going anti-alphabetically. So, and yeah, I think I want to do the cuts before the locks. But don't forget, if you strongly object to a cut, you may use your veto, but you only have 1 veto. I think when we did this 5 years ago, we didn't do a very good job of counting the vetoes, and I think that Marcos didn't even use his. So we'll try to be a little bit better with the bookkeeping of the podcast this time around. So Alana, please make the first cut of the episode.
Oh God.
The pressure's on.
Very much so.
It's okay to hurt people's feelings.
All right. I don't
Except mine.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Especially hurt my feelings.
There's a sisterhood, Eva. Don't worry, I won't hurt your feelings. But I think
Be nice, I'm fragile.
the first thing I'll cut is Dragon Age Origins.
But okay, I wasn't expecting this. So let's talk about it.
I thought you wanted pain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not like this.
You said hurt people's feelings, so and
Not
it was
like this.
you were the only person to pick it, if I'm right. I'll be honest. I guess being us, we are kind of a Japanese RPG catered website more, but we've got a couple of Western RPGs on this list, and this is the bottom of the pile out of the ones we've got for me. I think that. I don't know. This is terrible. I haven't really come on with a case other than the fact that I think that maybe one or the other is a bit more important. I don't know.
Okay, well, I am a little disappointed because this was one of the games that was on one of my lists. or I should say on my list for 2021. It's probably my favorite BioWare game. I really like the world they created. It's basically a traditional D&D style high fantasy world. You even pick warrior, mage, or rogue at the beginning for your main class for the whole game. And it has really cool interpretations of things like RPG elves and dwarves. I love the Dwarven Society and Dragon Age Origins, which I unironically call Dragon Age Oranges all the time.
The joke's never going to get old.
Yeah, it's an inside joke between me and some non-RPG fan friends that goes back about a decade. But am I the only person here that's played and enjoyed Dragon Age Oranges?
I played like maybe the first few hours, and I'll be honest, I agree with Alana. Like if given that our lists in general are very Japanese RPG centric for the most part, and if I'm gonna pick a Western RPG, well, I've got one on my list that I would pick over it, but also some others. So I think that it's a great game. It's probably worthy in lots of categories, but I think that there's just better stuff on the list.
Yeah, I've played 1 hour of it, and I wasn't really liking it from an aesthetic level, and just never really picked it up after that. Sorry.
2009 was a different time, but it is weird to have I don't know like a skirmish inside a castle wall and then a conversation with one of your companions right afterwards, but you're both just covered in blood from the fight that just happened.
Yeah, that is a very mid 2000s choice.
It's late 2000. I think this was 2009, right? Because it was after.
2002 is either 8 or 9.
I'm pretty sure Dragon Age 1 was after Mass Effect 1 and before Mass Effect 2. So when BioWare was in their shit, so to speak.
Right. I don't have any beef with Dragon Age or Oranges. It's better than the guy who used to pronounce it Origins. That was like, okay, stop.
Who does that?
What?
Some YouTuber guy.
Who is this person, and let me never talk to them.
Yeah, God, it was cringe. But I don't have any issue with the game itself. The console port was pretty wonky, but
yeah, I played it on PS3. I'm very aware of the wonk.
And I would like to see them do the Mass Effect Legendary Edition treatment with it. I think that I would appreciate it more then. But for me, what rubs me the wrong way about it is, like Eva said, the aesthetic level, the blood splatter. I think the character designs are honestly really ugly. And moreover, the marketing was terrible. Like, do you remember the Marilyn Manson song they used in the trailer?
Yeah. I totally forgot about that.
Oh my god. That just unlocked something.
That's reason enough to disqualify.
That is a deeply repressed memory, but oh my god, that was a choice.
If you thought the super slowed down version of What a Wonderful World from Dragon Age Inquisition was bad, it was considerably worse 5 or 6 years earlier. That's our first cut of the show. Dragon Age Oranges. I'm a little disappointed because it was on my list, but it is nowhere near the top 5 or 6 games I care about on my list. So I am not going to spend a veto. I'm not going to hold any grudges. But maybe it's time to start making some enemies on this podcast. Eva, it is your pick for the next cut.
Well, I think we should continue having holding a grudge against Western civilization. So I'm gonna say Skyrim. So
Jordan Peterson has entered the chat.
Yeah. 12 ways to get Skyrim out of this damn thing. Anyway, so Skyrim. I mentioned this to the other panelists previously. It is the game I have played the most of that I have the least positive things to say about in terms of I think I basically spent one summer just playing it. Like the year after it came out or so. I remember basically nothing, and I don't really hold particular fondness for it. It's just kind of bland to me. I don't really dig Bethesda games at this point, so that's just where I'm at with it.
Yeah, it's funny, really, isn't it? Because Skyrim is held up as such a landmark, but Bethesda over the years, I feel like more than any other company get away with a lot of stuff that I find really frustrating or extremely malicious is not the right word, but certainly there are certain things they've done over the years where I've kind of gone, I don't really agree with that. And Skyrim in particular, I remember at the time it came out, like, a lot of people were like, oh, it's not Oblivion, it's not Morrowind. And actually, I remember Oblivion a lot more than I do Skyrim. And I'm kind of wishing I picked Skyrim instead of, like, Dragon Age now instead for my first cut. But yeah, like, I watched friends play it multiple times. It was an old friend's favorite game, and it's just bland. Like, you know, there's tons to do, but it just doesn't excite me. And again, maybe that's just my slant on what I'm interested in. But
I mean,
yeah.
I just think the storytelling is really weak. It's just like side quests of the game, and the combat's weak. Like, I understand its popularity. I get why it would be popular with some people, but if Eva hadn't cut it, it was definitely in red highlighter first on my list to cut, because I just actually think it's a bad game. I don't think it's very fun at all. I spent maybe 30, 40 hours on it, which I think that's the longest I've ever played a game that I didn't like, which is very similar to Eva. I know we're hating on Western RPGs, but I just think there are significantly better choices on this list.
I think I'm slightly more positive on it than the three of you. Similar to Eva, I played it a couple years after it came out, put in 50 or 60 hours over a summer. I went through the main story, did a couple of the big side quests. I had a lot of fun. Like, my strategy for most of the game was like summon an elemental thing, then summon a conjurer bow, and then shoot enemies with my magic bow while my summon was attacking them. But then when I did that exact strategy for 100% of the encounters in the game, it maybe got a little boring. Like, Skyrim is a very empty feeling map, and for every cool thing that happens, like the Dark Brotherhood story, or certain moments of the plot, or certain maybe circumstantially cool battles against dragons and whatnot, for every one or two of those, it's just it's just hours of empty maps and bandit hideouts. And I think that Skyrim is not bad. I don't hate it, but I really don't have any feelings towards it one way or the other, and I played that thing for 50 plus hours. But Peter, you're the one that had it as one of your nominations. Why does Skyrim deserve to stay?
So I agree with all of you and all of the points you've made about Skyrim, because I don't really like it either. When it came out, I was very fervently in my anti-WRPG phase. And while I've mellowed out on that quite a bit, I still don't like... I don't really hate the game, but I don't really like Bethesda. I don't really like their design philosophy of release unfinished game and let the modders fix it for us. But with all that being said, I do think Skyrim is a very influential game, for better or for worse. I think that it sort of created a zeitgeist in open world RPG design that is still ongoing.
Yeah, I really think Dragon Age 3 was made in Skyrim's image in many ways.
Yeah, Dragon Age 3, I would argue Breath of the Wild and Horizon in their own way. Although, like, there are so many games that have taken what Skyrim did and iterated on it and made it more engaging and more interesting. But that sudden surge of popularity, I feel like, really did shape the industry for a while, which is why, even though I personally don't really enjoy it, I do feel like it objectively fits the qualification of essential. So this is me being a little weird about my choice of pick here. But,
okay, nominating a game that you just told us that you dislike.
I get it.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah,
I understand, but we're talking about, like, so if I was going to recommend something in Skyrim's image, you know what I mean? Like, I would recommend something that was actually good. You know, so I understand where you're coming from in terms of it being something. And I say good, like I could make anything half as good as Skyrim, but you know my point. Like, I would recommend something that takes those ideas and makes it something that actually is enjoyable to play. I totally
get that. But my counter argument would be that if you were looking at a list of games that defined what the RPG genre is in its current state, I feel like Skyrim would have to at least be mentioned, even if it doesn't make it on the final list. I totally don't have a problem with us cutting it.
All right, so you're not going to go even weirder and veto the cut that was.
Oh
just
no,
made.
I'm not wasting my veto on this. I'm sorry, Todd.
He's crying right now. I hope you know that.
And
No, it's
Bethesda
okay,
was
whatever.
dead to me as soon as they moved their offices away from Bethesda to Rockville. I mean, come on, rename yourselves
Right.
Rockville Studios, you cowards.
I'm going to open my Yu-Gi-Oh card binder and I realize that Todd somehow installed Skyrim on it. I don't know how that's physically possible, but he did it.
Todd, what
But-
did you do to my microwave?
I tried to make pasta, and instead I got bandits.
The only Todd that matters to me is Todd Snap.
Yes. What a good
Say-
boy.
I was going to say Todd McFarlane.
All right, okay. Now if we're talking about our favorite and least favorite Todds, I think it's definitely time to move on. Peter, after having to defend one of your picks, now you get to finally remove one of the picks from the game. Not just send it to the graveyard, you get to send it to the Shadow Realm.
Ooh, Shadow Realm. Okay.
Good reference.
Okay. Eva, I'm sorry. But I'm going to vote we should cut Transistor.
I'm gonna veto that.
All right,
Straight up.
that was
Not happening.
fast. Transistor moves to the consider list, which. So, Transistor, Eva and Alana, you and I talked about this game quite a lot on a podcast episode last year. I think Transistor is pretty great. I'm not sure if I think it's great enough to be in my final 10, but at least probably the final 20. Eva, that was a very decisive veto from you. Tell us why Transistor belongs in our top 10.
I think Transistor is an entirely unique game on this list. I don't think there's anything that plays or tells a story or has the interplay of mechanics, aesthetics, and narrative that Transistor has. And this is, we're into RPGs. All of these games are almost all of them are dozens of hours. Transistor is a game that I can recommend to just about anyone, even if they don't really have an interest in RPGs, but know how to, work a controller and be like, okay, here's this game. It's 8 hours. It's brilliant. Do you want to see what games can do when they're firing on all cylinders and making very few mistakes and reaching some pretty incredible heights in a short amount of time? That's what I see with Transistor, and that's why I'm immediately vetoing it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I think I knew that this game was going to be the one that I would have to fight for the most on my list. I'm going to scrape and claw as far as it can go. So.
Yes, chaos.
I knew you'd fight for it, Eva, because I know how much you like it. I think, Sollosi, you and I are probably on a more similar page with Transistor. I do really like it, and I don't know whether it would, if I had a 20, I don't know whether it would make it, but I think certainly Supergiant's entire library you could make a case for in different ways, and that's their entire thing, right? I feel like if I'm going to try and get somebody into RPGs and they've never played one before, I think any of their games would really fit here. So I'm absolutely not surprised to see one of them here. Transistor certainly has the art, the music, and the definite storytelling to deserve its place. But I may have other issues with it that I don't know whether I would keep it in, but I'm interested to see how far it goes, basically.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat to Alana. I think if we were cutting it down to 20, I would at least have Transistor strongly considered, but maybe not a 10. This again, this is just me trying to divide this list of 35 into rankings. But I think that, I should also mention this. There's no rules as to why a game deserves to be on the 10 or not. You can do it because it's a personal favorite. You can do it because you think it's very important to the genre, like Peter said with Skyrim, or you can do it because you think it needs representation. I don't think Transistor is one of my favorite games in this list. I mean, it isn't. But would I think it's cool to have a Supergiant game on the top 10? because I love Supergiant and love what they are and their aesthetic and what they represent, yes, that would maybe knock Transistor to a top 20 to an I accept this being in the top 10 kind of position. Because again, there's no rules as to why something does or does not belong. Just follow your heart. But I think Transistor is beautiful and cool. It's not my favorite Supergiant game, but it's really excellent. And I think it's worth discussing a little further. So of course I respect Eva's passion and determination here. So I'm not even gonna think of shoving Transistor away from the top 20, at least for now.
Oh, for sure. No, I like Transistor. Like, just to make myself clear, I'm being contradictory for podcast reasons, but primarily, the only reason that I would vote to cut Transistor is because I feel like of Supergiant's oeuvre, it's not my favorite, but also I feel like it's probably the least, I don't want to say least impactful, because that is a broad generalization, but if I had to pick one of their games to enshrine on a list of, again, I'm approaching this as a sort of objective industry important games, I would probably have gone with either Bastion or Hades. In fact, I'm really surprised Hades didn't make anyone's list. I thought it was going to be on Mike's.
Remember that our Retro Encounter is only allowed to cover games that are more than 2 years old, and Hades is a 2020 game.
Fair. Okay.
I did in fact consider it for my list before we established that rule.
Essential 10 Part 3 in 10 years is going to have Hades on it. And while I like Transistor a lot, I think aesthetically it does a lot of great things. The music's absolutely beautiful. The art direction is really gorgeous. Mechanically, I do have a few issues with it, primarily because... sorry, Alana.
No, I was just agreeing with you, yeah.
And this is something. This is an opinion that former RPG fan writers Rob Steinman and I kind of agree on.
Oh yeah, he's not a Transistor guy.
He doesn't like Transistor at all, and I think I'm a way more positive on it than he is. But one thing we can both agree on is that it's the kind of game where you can, yes, it offers a lot of experimentation in combat builds, but once you find a build that works, it kind of breaks the whole combat system, and then you just need to use that the whole time. Which for me was the dash with the scattering bombs everywhere. That was my move for the entire game. Once I figured out I could do that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's lots of games with kind of unbalanced combat systems, but it is a point of contention for me.
All right, but Peter, your turn isn't over yet because that was vetoed. You have another cut to make.
Dragon Quest XI.
Am I going to use it here or not?
Yeah.
I'm using it here. Veto.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh my god.
I can't want to use it yet, but I will.
No, you can't. Because Dragon Quest XI is my favorite game of the 2010s.
That's fair.
Dragon Quest is one of my favorite series of all time. There was no Dragon Quest game that made the list in 2016. So when I was making my list of submissions this time, I'm like, all right, we need to get a Dragon Quest game on the list, and I want it to be Dragon Quest XI because it's the most beautiful, complete Dragon Quest game that draws heavy inspiration from Dragon Quest III, which is I think 1989. So it's a game, a 2017 game with 1989 concepts and ideas that is an incredibly beautiful, satisfying package. And it was my favorite game of 2018, which was the year it came out in North America. And I feel very strongly about it. So it is. I want it to make the final 10, but I am not. It will be a fight to have this, not make it out of this episode.
It's an interesting thing because it goes back to sort of my idea about what makes something essential. Because if Skyrim's essential, then Ultima or Dragon Warrior 1 is essential too. You know what I mean? But I think that in this case, you're taking a game in a series and you are honing it to a fine sheen in a way that it is if I was ever going to introduce someone to the genre of JRPGs, despite the fact that it is 100 hours long, it would be Dragon Quest XI. I think that it's just it is a perfect entry point. It's breezy, it's light, it's beautiful, it's got great combat, but it's accessible. It's got phenomenal characters.
I'm not sure I like a cast of characters on this list of 35 that we have here more than Dragon Quest XI.
I might, but yeah. But the point is that I think it is the quintessential JRPG, and I think it's a perfect entry point. I think it is one of the 20 most essential RPGs ever made.
You have nothing to add to that, really. But, like, Peter, I'm interested. Why did you go to cut it?
Well, A, I was under pressure. B, I really love Dragon Quest XI as well, so I agree with you on all of these points. But, again, sacrifices have to be made, and when I look at the company that it's in, I feel like there are just other games that I would find more interesting, even though Dragon Quest XI is, as you put it, like the quintessential JRPG. And that's always been Dragon Quest's thing, is that it's kind of the comfort JRPG, you know? It's got, they're really good examples of the form, and sometimes they are even really great games. But again, in present company with all the other great stuff on this list, I'm just like, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really hard because Dragon Quest XI was on my list as well. I did consider 5 as well.
5 or even 8. Like, I would have, like...
Yeah, but I think, like, whatever Zach said, like, it's basically, like, it's the perfect traditional modern day RPG. Like, it is... You know, you don't have to, like, some people I know are really averse to playing anything that's like 2005 or PS2. They don't like pixel graphics, but they want something that's like traditional. And actually Dragon Quest XI subverts some things as well. You know, it's got Act 2 and Act 3, and yeah, it's 100 hours long, but like it's absolutely like to a T, right down to like, you know, how just everything mechanically. Like it's this nice perfect blend of traditional and modern, and yeah, I think I'm going to try and fight for it as much as I can as well.
Yeah, I will too. I've already spoken on it, but I am going to fight for Dragon Quest XI to make the top 10 and not just the top 20. So expect that to happen later this episode, hopefully also next episode, but no guarantees. But also one thing that's no guaranteed is that will Peter ever be able to be allowed to cut something? Because we still need a cut from you somehow, Peter. What's it going to be?
All right, my next option would be Witcher 3.
I am not going to veto, but I disagree.
I know.
All right. Yeah, Zach, Witcher 3 was on your list, so why does it deserve to stay?
I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Skyrim. I mean, like, it takes... when I say, like, side quest the game, I think you could also kind of call The Witcher 3 side quest the game, but the side quests in The Witcher 3 are phenomenal. You know, it's got a great story, like the little individualized stories and the way they build and the way that choice actually matters in The Witcher 3. Like, I think that it is... I mean, the combat is a little bit wonky. It's not too bad, but it's a little wonky. But in terms of pure storytelling, I'm actually not sure that I can think of a single RPG that I think is better on a moment-to-moment storytelling basis. And the way that it works together. It was my Western RPG that I included. I certainly have more fondness for other games on this list, but I honestly think that The Witcher 3 might be the best game on my list, outside of Nier Automata. I'm not going to veto because I have other places that I know I'm going to need to use it later, but I think The Witcher 3 is a phenomenal game.
I feel bad here because I've never really given the Witcher series a fair shot. I tried playing The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3 at different points. Not recently. This was all at least 4 or 5 years ago. But I just never liked the way Geralt moved. It's just like parts of it feel sluggish, and like working against me, where games even like Skyrim felt like I was at least felt more natural, or felt or the moment to moment action was more fun. I know that with The Witcher 3 has brilliant writing and is many people's favorite Western RPG, or among their favorites for that reason. But I just couldn't get over that the game wasn't as fun to play as I wanted it to be. So I'm not gonna say I don't have a lot to say because I haven't put a lot of time into The Witcher, but yes, that's not my jam, and I do like a lot of Western RPGs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. The Witcher as a property I find interesting, and I do find the writing in the game very interesting. It's more to do with, like Mike said, I think that all of those games have a fair amount of Eurojank in them, and while Witcher 3 keeps it to a minimum, it's still a little unwieldy. Moreover, though, I just don't like the pedestal that CD Projekt Red's been placed on in the industry, and I feel like Witcher 3 is sort of the catalyst for a lot of that.
So you're holding Cyberpunk 2077 against The Witcher 3?
I'm holding not exactly. I don't care about Cyberpunk either, but the working conditions at CD Projekt Red that have come out since then, for both while they were working on Witcher and after, I don't know. I can't agree with that from an ethical standpoint.
All right.
So if that was that's more of my reasoning.
Well, from an ethical standpoint, I feel bad for the entire genre of CRPG, where the C, of course, stands for Caucasian. So I'm going to make sure that my cut, which is going to happen in a few seconds, is of a Japanese game. And looking at our list of 35, now 32, it's going to be Shadow Hearts. So I'll move it to the deleted list unless we have a veto in the next several seconds.
Peter, you've had a rough first round, buddy.
Yeah, I feel really bad. No one's touched mine. I'm a little scared. Like,
I don't mind. It can go. I like Shadow Hearts a lot. We've done a whole podcast about that where you can listen to and find out how wonderful it is. But it's also very inaccessible. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind taking it off of an essential list.
Yeah, we've talked. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you can find it, play it.
I'll say, though, we've talked about jank with a couple of games. Shadow Hearts is an early PS1 RPG that came out at the same time as FF10, and it is janky and pretty ugly at times, and
oh yeah,
like it is it's budget, like there's no way around it. But like, and I love Shadow Hearts, like original Shadow Hearts and Covenant, both brilliant. I adore them, but Essential, I don't know. Like it's aged better than I think I'm giving it credit for, and like I played it like a few years after it came out, but yeah, I certainly think there's a lot more barriers of entry, like getting hold of it for a start, like just kind of how incredibly dated it looked even at the time. Like immediately it looked like a late PS1 game, and there's just lots of little things that make it just... Yeah, I'm not sure I would recommend, especially because it's got, like, it's one of those things, like, it's got a really strange tone that I think would be really interesting to recommend somebody, but, like, yeah, I don't know whether I would put it up as, like, not even, like, as one of my favorites. Like, even if you, like, give someone a list of 10 games I love, it probably wouldn't be on there. But, yeah, I absolutely appreciate that you put it on there, and I love the series, too, so a little sad to see it go, but, like, yeah, it was on one of my potential cuts as well, sadly.
I'm not sure I would say I love the series. I love Shadow Hearts Covenant. That game is awesome. And I love how weird the first few hours of Shadow Hearts from the New World is, because I did play that and mostly enjoy it, but I got waylaid by something or the other. But I've tried to play Shadow Hearts, not over and over, but maybe twice, and both times I'm like, I don't think I like this. I'm not having fun here. And even though I love Shadow Hearts Covenant, and I want to see how the first part of that story goes, because they are direct sequels, from the New World's a little bit more detached from the first two. But I just don't think Shadow Hearts holds up as a great Japanese RPG, especially since the PS2 library is so loaded. If this list had Shadow Hearts Covenant and not the first Shadow Hearts on it, then I probably would be fighting for it instead of cutting it. But here we are.
For my money, I think it's a pretty essential companion for Covenant, because a lot of that game's conflict and Yuri's character growth is spread across the two games. And I also think that of the series, it's the only one of the Shadow Hearts games that feels like a spiritual successor to Kudelka.
Yeah, I'd
the
agree.
game that started it all.
But that's, I mean, is that? I don't think that's important. I think just Shadow Hearts Covenant is a straight up much better game than the first Shadow Hearts.
Right.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere and the conceit of we're going to take a survival horror premise and atmosphere and tone and mix it with JRPG mechanics. I can kind of only point to Parasite Eve as another example of a successful merging of those genres. And I think Shadow Hearts is really interesting for it, the first one. And as they go on, they're still great. Covenant's an amazing game. I would say it's a bit more of a more traditional JRPG by that point.
Yeah, definitely is. I don't think you need to play... I think playing the original Shadow Hearts before Covenant, it certainly adds to the emotional impact. I don't think you need to play it, though, which is sad. I think you should, but I don't think you need to.
I really want to, but can anybody find me a copy for less than $200?
An affordable one, yeah.
I could lend you mine once it's a little bit more, humanly responsible to travel. But
that's how I got my copy was from a generous donation from another RPG fan staffer. So.
All right, but speaking of generous donations from RPG fan staffers, Zach, I would like you to donate another cut to our list here.
I think I'm going to have to pick on Yakuza 0.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
I don't...
Oh, no.
I don't have a veto left.
Neither do I. I was going to make it one of my locks.
I'm sorry.
I can't believe this.
I've played... I'll admit, I've played maybe 10 hours of Yakuza 0. And maybe that's an unfair position to come at it from. I thought it was a fine game, but I played it immediately after Like a Dragon, which I think is a superior game in basically every capacity as far as I got. I thought the combat felt pretty stiff. I know that apparently it gets better as you get more abilities. It just felt like it felt pretty bloated to me in a way that made it difficult for me to sort of see my way through it. And I think that other games later in the series iterate on some of those ideas in more streamlined ways, lists that I've seen. But again, I played 10 hours. So, but in terms of like games that I can speak to, this is one that I don't think really belongs.
I'm not joking. It was going to be one of my locks, maybe my first lock. I'm not sure about that yet, but because I didn't get a chance. But I think Yakuza 0 is just one of the most video games ever made. It has an incredibly entertaining, dramatic story, if you see through it further than Zach did, I guess. And it balances this really serious tone with the main story with a completely absurd comedic tone with a lot of its side content that just, I don't know, that I feel enhances both of those tones. And the combat is sort of an evolution of like, you know, the beat 'em up genre, like your Final Fights and Streets of Rages of the world. And the characters are really entertaining the deeper you go into them. If you play more Yakuza games beyond 0, you'll just find certain scenes heartbreaking. Avoiding spoilers here, like what happens. Like I think conservatively, at least 6 or 7 characters of Yakuza 0 die in later Yakuza games. Later in the timeline Yakuza games, but and also just the wealth of mini games, from the disco to the karaoke to 4 1980s Sega arcade cabinets recreated faithfully. I don't know. I just had I played Yakuza 0 for the podcast in 2020. And then I even replayed parts of it like several months later because I sort of missed living in 1988 Kamurocho and Sotenbori, and it was as fun as I remembered. I'm a little disappointed that it's being cut this early.
I also am a bit disappointed it's being cut this early because I think Yakuza 0 is a fantastic game. I think a lot of stuff that Sollosi says really holds up. This is a game that really lives in the dissonance of being a video game that is trying to tell a serious story while also being kind of a period piece. And instead of... there's such confidence to the way it works in terms of living in its inherent silliness or actually giving its characters the space to breathe and grieve and to experience pain. I think Goro Majima is one of the best characters in video games. And I think it's a great game. I am also sad to see it go, but I'm glad we got to talk it up a bit more. I think it's a fantastic game.
I understand all your points, and there's a possibility that I didn't see some of those things. But like I said, the first 10 hours, it just didn't. I thought, like, I played Judgment, where the combat I thought felt way better, and I thought the characters in Like a Dragon were significantly more compelling to me. And so, yeah, I mean, just having played other iterations or other games in the series, I just enjoyed them more. So, to me, like, if it's like my third favorite of the ones that I've played, that means that I probably wouldn't move it forward personally. But I understand your points. I apologize.
well, that's okay. Well, that's okay. I'll just have to come twice as hard at Dragon Quest XI now.
Fight.
Well, I was gonna only target Peter's games, but now I'm conflicted. And I should mention, this is mostly directed at Eva and I guess. The games that were vetoed and that got moved onto the considered list, Transistor and Dragon Quest XI, we can still use our locks on those if we're worried it might not survive the final 15. So, like, you can put your lock on a game that has not been addressed yet, or you can put a lock on a game that was vetoed if you're feeling threatened that it might not survive. So just throwing that out there, because I might be thinking about doing that, but we'll see exactly where we go. But we are done with the first round of cuts. Dragon Age Origins, Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, Witcher 3, Shadow Hearts, and Yakuza 0 are all gone. Now we can get a little positive and start locking games, and hopefully spend a little bit less time arguing, because this episode is gonna be a long one, I can already tell. And we're gonna go in reverse order this time. Zach, you give us your first lock.
Lunar, Silver Star Story.
All right.
Is my lock. Mostly because I'm afraid that someone's going to attack it.
I was thinking about it because it's not even the best game in its series.
I disagree.
Gotta say, I was eyeing that one too, but I also know how important it is, especially for this site, you know?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
As a person who first started reading RPG Fan before it was called RPG Fan, I got here because it was called LunarNet many years ago. To me, Lunar 1 in particular captures a particular kind of charm and beauty that I don't think the second one, I think, does some things better, and I know it's on your list, Sollosi, and I think it's excellent, and I would be happy to see it go forward as well. But I just feel like the characters are more charming there. I feel like it was the game that convinced me that the thing that I care about in RPGs is characters. And I've been playing RPGs for years before I played Silver Star Story Complete. But I just love the interplay. I love just even like kind of the cheese of it really works for me. I think it's just a delightful game, and I would consider it to be one of the most essential RPGs ever made.
I really like Lunar 1. I mean, I'm not making it a secret. I think the second one's better. But one thing that I think I love about Lunar 1 that, if you know me, is probably not a surprise, is how romantic it is. Because there's 6 main characters, and they basically are 3 romantic pairs, and each one is a different kind of romance. Like, the 2 of them are childhood friends that are too embarrassed to say that they like each other and won't act on it until a crisis happens, basically. 2 of them are exes that still like each other, but find it difficult to get along, and the game is partially about them reconnecting. And the last,
Kyle and Jessica per days.
Yeah. Kyle and Jessica, maybe the 2 most entertaining in the game, especially since I mean Luna and Alex are kind of vanilla versions. Let's be honest here. And then you have the last 2, Nash and Mia, who is somewhat of an unrequited love, where one really cares about the other one only likes the other as a friend, and their relationship goes in a sort of not even a good direction, a slightly unexpected direction that has that creates a conflict in the group. It's it's a very romantic game. It's a very satisfying, good Japanese RPG. I just like Lunar 2 better, which is why I was thinking about cutting it next round, I should say.
That's fair. And again, I understand why people might prefer Eternal Blue, but I just think there's an innocence to the first one that I think is lost a little bit in Lunar 2. And I just feel like, and if you're looking at sort of like the full scope of the game, like the original 92 release, sort of using those anime cutscenes in ways that I don't think a lot of games had too much yet. There are other games in this list that I think did use them, but to the impact that they did with Lunar. So not just its significance to the site, but also its significance to the genre, and also just I think it's delightful, and that's why I like it so much.
Oh, and geez, we're talking about anime cutscenes. It has one of the best anime cutscenes of all time. The boat song is the most Disney movie moment of any RPG
lovely.
I've ever played. It's awesome.
Which is why the PS1 version is objectively superior.
Yeah, why would anyone defend the Sega CD version when it doesn't have the boat song?
I like some of its moves with Galleon a little bit better in the Sega CD version. I think there's an argument to be made about it, but I definitely prefer the PS1 version.
No, there is a totally fair argument with how it looks, and the 8-bit cutscenes are really good, but it doesn't have the boat song. That's a problem.
Fair.
All right, well, okay.
That's
now,
a deal breaker.
okay, but now we're going to do some deal makers instead of deal breakers. We have our next lock, and it is mine. So I'm going to look through this list a little bit. I should have thought ahead somewhat. I'm going to correct the mistakes of the past. I'm going to put Skies of Arcadia in the locks.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to do.
Because
Thanks, Sollosi.
I know that
Bravo,
Alana might have done that on her own, but if I look at the games here that I care the most about, that I'm slightly worried about not making the final 10, and also just to express my intent, Skies of Arcadia is amazing and should be on our 10, and that's why I'm making it a slightly spur of the moment lock right now. And if there's one thing that I think is special about it, that is why it's on my list to begin with, it's the most beautiful world map ever made. It is the best RPG world map. It is awesome.
It's so good. Yeah. I was absolutely going to put it in this round, and which is the most predictable thing I could have done, but also for similar reasons. Like, in a way, like it's probably more inaccessible than Shadowhearts is. But I think the world map, the side quests, the kind of joy and the charm that a lot of Sega RPGs sort of bring, it's all there for me. Like, it's a piece of magic that will never be replaced for me personally. And like, I think it's going to be a hard sell to get there, but I'm going to do everything I can because I do think it's really important for the genre, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised that more games haven't taken from it, and it's not really made a reappearance since, but I think it absolutely deserves it. It's probably the top 2 game, one of top 2 games on the Dreamcast, one of Sega's best RPGs and video games, and yeah, it's just wonderful.
And right now all we get are Valkyria Chronicles and Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing cameos.
Scraps.
I want to play it, so I'm happy to see it go on.
My copy is of Skies of Arcadia Legends is on loan to another RPG fan staffer right now.
Ironically,
I can't borrow all your games.
Ironically, I have a copy of like both Lunar and Skies of Arcadia, and they're probably 2 of the most expensive RPGs to get physically. So, yeah, ironic that they would both make it through.
Speaking of games making it through, Peter, give us your first lock.
Okay, so I'm also going to lock something that isn't on my list. I'm going to lock Twelly.
Wait, that
Yes,
isn't
Peter.
on your list?
No, it's not.
Oh, well, Skies of Arcadia was on my list, but it was also on Alana's list. But that's only an unimportant detail. Let's talk about The World Ends With You.
Yeah, so I actually played The World Ends With You for the first time this year because Eva let me borrow her copy. Thank you for that, by the way. And I really liked it. It took me. It's one of those things where I had a really hard time getting into it at first because that combat system is a lot to wrap your head around. But once I got into it, I found it to be a really unique and deeply personal RPG that has a lot that more than any other. This is probably one of the first pieces of media since the original run of Neon Genesis Evangelion that really understands what depression and isolation is like. And it spoke to me on a really personal level. And so I think it's a really important game that should be at least up for consideration for the Essential 10.
I mean, I played The World Ends With You for the podcast several years ago, probably 2016, I think.
Yeah, I was in Cornwall listening to that one.
Well, I was so impressed with its visual and mechanical ideas, but they didn't always gel with me. It would sometimes the going through the game was a struggle, especially in when you're trying to first learn the combat, and then in the third chapter where I didn't like my partner character as much as the first two chapters. But it conceptually goes really interesting places, and I like how it's, even though I don't always love Nomura's games, it's maybe the most Nomura game that's ever Nomura'd, and I respect it for that. I also respect it for not being Kingdom Hearts. That's a positive.
Although those characters are in Kingdom Hearts.
I'm not surprised.
They are.
I'm not surprised. I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised.
Thank you, Peter, for locking this game. It totally wasn't a political move by me to send you this game for this very moment. No, I mean, I adore this game. I think it is a beautiful game. I think it's, once again, kind of with Transistor, it has such a brilliant interplay of mechanics, narrative, and aesthetics. And it's kind of the best use of unique hardware that I've seen. The DS is an entirely unique system, at least at the time, with its dual screen formatting. This game takes advantage of that better than any other game with all its quirks. There be times where you're going to yell into the DS to activate a sound-based pin that you have for damage. You have to kind of split your focus between two of the screens to be able to use both of the characters' abilities and effects. It is not the easiest game to play. It's not the most accessible. But that's what I find beautiful about it, because it fires on all cylinders when your character, Neku, and whoever his partner is, are working in harmony and concert. And you can't really get through the game on its purported difficulty without that interplay. And it really spoke to me as me, Eva, I like to lone wolf things and at times, and it's a reminder, like, no, you can't always do that. So I really love this game. I think it's beautiful. I'm very glad it's locked and I didn't have to lock it.
All right, and speaking of Eva and speaking of locks, it is your time to lock something, Eva. What are you feeling this round?
I think I'm going to lock Bloodborne.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Bloodborne is a so I played this game shortly after I had lost a job and I just had like way too much free time and just really dove into it. And I guess I feel like this is a story that happens for a lot of people from soft games. It's like, oh, I just had this sort of calamitous thing, so I'm just going to play this oppressive-ass game. And Bloodborne is brilliant. The combat is so ridiculously fun and fine-tuned. I can't wait for it to be in 60 FPS because of, 30 FPS with frame skips, as everyone says. The storytelling in it, in its environments, and in all these little nooks and crevices in its world is just brilliant. It really is a game that the more you put in, the more you get out. Not going to spoil it for people, but the mid-game turn that it has is one of the most wild and just absolutely brilliant things I've seen in a game. Absolutely horrifying, beautiful in some way. The music is incredible. The lore is some of the best and most dense I've ever seen. I love this game. Definitely want to lock it.
I have a copy of Bloodborne. It's even free to PS Plus subscribers that have a PS5. So I have that version digitally and a version physically. Rob Steinman has been bugging me to play it for almost as long as I've known him. It looks really awesome. I just have this complex about From Software games that I don't want to start one because I'm worried it'll be too much of a time commitment and too much pain and suffering when I could be playing something else. And that's most of why I haven't played it. But I'm really interested in Bloodborne.
I couldn't even get to the first boss, but because I'm bad at video games. But the aesthetics of it, like I can totally see. This is based on word of mouth alone. That I think it's probably a deserving candidate personally.
It's on my short list to play for sure because I've been trying to catch up on FromSoft's back catalog, but I am also bad at video games, so I've tried to play it a couple times and I've had a rough time. But I will eventually push through.
All right, but we still have to push through the rest of this podcast. We're already been done with round 2 out of 5. So Alana, give us your last lock of this round.
So I'm going to go with something I also didn't put on my list, but I wish I'd put on my list, and I feel like people would have expected me to put on my list, but I stupidly forgot about it. I'm going to put Stardew Valley in for a lock.
Yay!
I have put 250 hours into this game, and it has basically... It is my comfort video game of all time. And also it's like the only game on this list like it. And it's basically changed that genre forever. Like, I may have put more time into Animal Crossing than I did Stardew, and I may have put some time into Harvest Moon, Rune Factory, on and off over the years. But nothing has quite grabbed me with the openness, the inclusivity, the like day-to-day routine, the writing, the music, quite like Stardew Valley has ever, and I just think it's an incredibly important indie RPG / farm simulator that deserves to be an essential video game, essentially. So, yeah, that's really all I can say about it.
Yeah, yay! I'm excited. Yeah, because Stardew Valley is really fun, and it's just an impressive indie project. Like, the fact that it was like this one dude who like put a second mortgage on his house to pay for the development, and it was like a totally sink or swim thing. It's just really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I wish he didn't have to do that. It's a story that I know. Don't worry.
Absolutely not. Wish that it wasn't a thing that had to happen. But it is kind of an amazing story nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the fact that like he still updates it, like, probably yearly with major patch content for free. Like, it's had 5 massive updates for free, like introducing new characters, new marriage options, new things, new islands. Every year we get something for free. That game is like, is it $20? I don't think it's $20, is it? And it's like
15.
Yeah.
I think it maybe started at 20, but now you find it for 15.
Yeah, so it's kind of remarkable. It's an absolute. It is the pinnacle of that particular niche. So, yeah, I think it deserves to be in the conversation.
All right, I haven't played a ton of farming games, but I do own a copy of Stardew Valley, mostly because of Alana, Mike Salbato, Hillary talking it up so much, and it's cute and interesting, but I haven't put a ton of time into it, so I don't have any meaningful commentary for it. Which is I'm too much of my commentary is saying I don't have commentary. That's podcasting in a nutshell for you. But one other thing about podcasting is editing and cutting, and I think we're back to that round again.
You're just knocking these transitions out of the park.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I'm all over the place this time. I mean, part of this episode is transistor, so of course it has to have some great transitions. But we're doing the snake draft format again, so Alana, it is your turn again, but this time to cut something. What is going to go to the guillotine this time around?
Well, I giveth Peter with one hand and I taketh away with another. Dark Souls 3 has to be cut, unfortunately, and I think Bloodborne is the superior FromSoft Soulsborne Sekiro game.
Oh, I'm gonna fight you.
Oh wait,
you can't veto. Can you veto? Or,
no, he can. Hold up a minute, because this is the last round where you're allowed to veto. So now it's Peter's time to shine if he wants Dark Souls to survive a round.
No, but I agree with you on Bloodborne too. So it's okay. I will not veto this one.
All right.
It's a shame because like Dark Souls 3, you can make an argument for Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne. But yeah, I just think that
Or
if there's
3D
going-
Game Heroes. 3D Game Heroes from Software's personal pinnacle. I mean, come on, obviously. Obviously.
What? Not Eternal Ring?
Yeah, I was going to say. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. I just think that, like, I think Bloodborne is the one I would pick every time over it. I've played a little bit of both of them, and I just prefer Bloodborne mechanically, visually, aesthetically, lore-wise, in every way almost. Dark Souls 3 is great, but, like, I just think Bloodborne is kind of the refinement of the Soulsborne formula, and is the one that should be there over. So, yeah, it's more of a, like, splitting hairs with this at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since we've already locked in Bloodborne, I won't fight about this one. For my money, I think Dark Souls 3 is a great entry point. It was the first Souls game that I finished. And I also think it's interesting because it's almost kind of like a greatest hits album. Like, it is like, here are all these things that are based on stuff from Dark Souls 1 and 2, and we've kind of all thrown it into a blender, and it really does seem in a lot of ways the best of those games. They even have some parts of it that are clearly pretty inspired by Bloodborne. Glares at Sister Frida. But yeah, no, I'm not going to fight it. Bloodborne is certainly more unique in terms of its aesthetics and lore, whereas Dark Souls 3 is kind of more Dark Souls. But
I have asked people separately what is the best From Software game to start with, and I think Rob Steinman, who's played all of them, said Dark Souls 3 or Sekiro. And Keegan, on a podcast with him when I talked about never having finished a From Software game, he suggested Dark Souls 3. So I think there's some value to this. This is maybe it didn't have the impact that Dark Souls 1 did, but it has, but it's sort of a culmination of what Dark Souls is, and is not still a little obtuse, or I should say a little opaque, but more accessible than its predecessors.
It's less esoteric, I think. But yeah, like some of those more opaque systems are maybe brought to the foreground this time. Covenants are a little less confusing, I think. And in general, the way the world is laid out, it's not the interwoven maze of Dark Souls 1's Lordran, but it's not the teleport to different bonfires, hodgepodge mess that is Dark Souls 2. So you kind of have this like nice middle ground where the world is still, it feels connected even though you are still kind of going from a hub to a bunch of disparate zones. So yeah, no, it's definitely a good entry point if you're looking to jump into the series with a little less difficulty. But if you want to jump into the deep end, like head first, Bloodborne is where it's at.
And we're really dancing around, and we're all actually wrong, because the best entry point for From Software is actually Metal Wolf Chaos.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
I thought you were going to throw a curveball and say Kingsfield, but yeah.
No, why would I say that when Metal Wolf Chaos exists? Come on.
Michael Wilson is the greatest American president, real or fictional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the vice president is throwing a coup. I better go to the secret bunker under the White House and get this giant mecha that we've been developing in secret.
God,
How can you say a bad word against it?
I can't.
Senator Armstrong is there for some reason too.
Okay, so I don't think any of the remaining games have presidents or mecha in it. Surprising, because no one nominated Xenogears or Xenoblade Cross. But Eva, give us our next cut.
I am going to go with Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. It looks to be a fine game. I'm sure it is good. I've not played it, and I just don't really care much about it. That's all. Not trying to be harsh here, but that's just I don't feel nothing.
It's my favorite Zelda game. giving you a lot of freedom in how you can approach the different dungeons, and letting you rent or buy equipment in any order is a really unique vibe and order to how Zelda dungeons are. It makes all of the dungeons a little easy because they can't all be quite scaled for difficulty by getting them one item at a time, sort of. So like the game will feel a little too hard at the beginning of right around the midpoint, and then feel a little too easy near the end point because of the weird pacing of how it is. But it's fun weird pacing, and I think it has my favorite Zelda dungeons and my favorite selection of Zelda equipment. So it's my favorite Zelda game, but I guess off the list it goes.
I mean, I think it's a really fun game too. But I actually, the reason that I chose A Link to the Past over it was what you were just talking about. I think that A Link to the Past feels like the difficulty is scaled more appropriately. I like the story a little bit more in A Link to the Past, like the kind of the feel of it a little bit more. But it's a super fun Zelda game. It's definitely one of my top 3.
Yeah, traversing the world, especially with the painting mechanic, is really interesting. And I do like the freeform approach to dungeon exploration as well, just because it almost feels like a precursor to what Breath of the Wild did, where it gave you all your powers from the outset.
I tried to 100% Link Between Worlds a couple of years ago. And in fact, it was the year that we had Zelda Month, so it was 2018. And I got really close, but I cannot get the final heart piece because the baseball minigame is infuriating.
It is. You're right.
And I think you get like 20 balls, and you have to hit 19 home runs to get some insane number like that to get the heart piece. So the one thing I dislike about Link Between Worlds is one minigame holding me off from 100% completion. But truthfully, the 3 Zelda games we had on the list, Link Between Worlds, Link to the Past, and Breath of the Wild, might be my top 3 Zelda games, or at least 3 of my top 4. So I'm not heartbroken if my Zelda pick isn't the one that makes it. But yeah, it's my favorite Zelda game. Not much else to say here. Oh, I guess there is something to say here. Peter, we need a cut from you. And we still have 3 people with vetoes, so Peter, you can veto yourself.
Amazing.
I'm going to say Trails in the Sky SC.
Makes sense. Yeah, given that you brought first chapter in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue it, because part of my case would be that they would basically be a package, which is maybe a bit of a cheat. The reason I picked second chapter over first chapter is I think it's massively superior. That's literally it.
It is.
And my favorite is the third, which most people don't consider one of the best ones. But I can't recommend the third over second chapter because that's 2 games as a point of entry and not 1.
Right, and that's where I'm at. Is like, so I was torn between which Kaseki game to put on my list. It was either going to be this or Cold Steel 1. And while I like Cold Steel 1, it definitely has a fair share of, let's charitably say, questionable content. Whereas
It gets worse.
I know it gets worse. That's why I'm hesitant to keep playing this series. But even though I did really enjoy my time with it. But Trails in the Sky 1 is like the first retro encounter we ever did. And at the time, I did not like it at all because I was still in school and trying to play this game on a time crunch. And we were still doing 3 episodes instead of 2 every month. And it just burned me out immediately. But in hindsight, I think that it is probably the ideal starting point for the Trails series, especially considering how accessible it is on Steam.
It is the first game.
Yeah, well, it's readily available. It's an old enough game that like you could probably run it on your toaster, and the story is really sweet. I like Josh and Estelle. I like their budding relationship and their camaraderie. And the general tone and themes of that story are just so well done, and it all does come to a climax and ends on one of the world's most infuriating cliffhangers because we had to wait years for SC to get localized, and that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, I believe those games are 2005 and 2006 in Japan, and the localizations happened respectively, I think, in 2011 and 2016. So
Something like that.
So it was a 4 or 5 year wait for English language fans in the 2010s for that, and so that was a struggle. But I mean, I've played 4 Trails games, Sky 1 and Sky 2, plus Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2, and my favorite is the one that Peter just cut, Second Chapter, because it has that charm and the character relationships and the tone of First Chapter, but with bigger story stakes and feeling like a mission with real urgency and determination. When the first one was almost like a world tour of this very charming setting. First Chapter is valuable setup, and Second Chapter is really satisfying payoff. So I enjoyed Second Chapter more than First Chapter for that reason. But I mean, maybe it's a lunar thing where the one I like is the superior sequel, but people have nostalgia blinders for the first one for some dumb reason.
Well,
I guess.
In my case though, this isn't even. In my case, this isn't even a nostalgia blinders thing. It's just that this isn't a Shadow Hearts Covenant thing, where you could maybe argue that Shadow Hearts Covenant stands on its own. Trails in the Sky SC does not stand on its own.
Yeah,
like
it's a very direct sequel. Yes,
it is a very direct sequel, and that's the thing about Kiseki, is that this franchise is a very interwoven story with varying levels of setup and payoff that you really do need to play them sequentially. And that's and if you don't play FC, then you will not get the same impact out of SC that you guys are all talking about and that you guys all love. So for that reason alone, I would want to take it off of an essential list.
Yeah, I can't argue against it. Like, I love SC, and again, did consider Cold Steel as well, but I have too many problems with those games now in hindsight, or retrospect even. And yeah, First Chapter is the perfect setup. I knew, when I saw it on your list, Peter, I knew Second Chapter was not making it, and I was like, I'd made peace with it at that point. I was like, fine.
All right, so we talked a lot about 2 of the Trails games while cutting 1 a moment ago. So now it is my turn to make a cut. And let's see here. So Long Undertale.
Veto.
There are
veto.
Oh, wait, we have a veto. Okay.
Veto.
I like Undertale. It's it's maybe even more quintessential indie RPG success than Stardew Valley is, because it was entirely made by one person, except I think they contracted in some visual effects and some porting help with other people, and Toby Fox's accomplishment for that is hugely impressive. But I think it's a game that I'm going to throw around a term that I hate using, that I've expressed on the podcast that I hate using. I'm not sure there's a more overrated game on this list, because there is like Undertale has created a community of such incredible dedication that I'm almost a little puzzled by it. Like, this is a unique, unusual, special game, but I played it once and I don't think I ever want to play it again. But Jesus, the internet gets weird about Undertale. This was a bit of a bait. I was ready to cut it and see what happened, and that's what happened. I like Undertale.
I understand your point. The memification of Undertale, I think, is the worst thing about Undertale, right?
And the memification of Yakuza 0 is one of the best things about it. But now, but now I really can sing "I've Been a Fool."
But I think that I understand that, like, I think in some ways Undertale is held up in ways that nowadays, years later, maybe it shouldn't be as much. But I think that I played it much later. I played it, I don't know. I actually think I had started an RPG fan by the time I played Undertale. That I still think there are so many things it does so incredibly well. Like, the music, I think, is stellar. And I think that even though it's playing around with like sort of meta-narrative stuff in ways that are like trying to talk back to the player in ways that are maybe not as fresh today as they were when the game was released, I still think they're incredibly moving. I think that the ending in either the pacifist route or the neutral route or even the what's the other route called?
Genocide route.
The genocide route, which I've watched. There's no way I could ever bring myself to do that.
Yeah.
Are incredibly moving and incredibly interesting. Not from even to me like a meta perspective. I don't really care that much about that sort of thing. But from a pure character perspective, I think that it is really, really engaging and really moving. And I think that I like the combat elements of it a lot. I think it's challenging in a way that is reasonable. I'll admit that I am particularly impressed that it's made by one person, but I actually think that, and I hate to kind of go back to an argument that I was sort of arguing against earlier. I think that the significance to what it did for indie development and other games that I've played that have sort of clearly been born out of that in ways that I think are really great, as opposed to earlier indie games that I'm less impressed with, is really important to me. And I wept a lot at the end of this game, and I can't see it cut yet.
This is a personal thing, but I'm so annoyed at myself for how I played Undertale. I knew that there was, it was sort of special to try to beat the game at level 1. But at the very beginning of the game, in the first dungeon, when I really wasn't sure what to do, I killed 2 enemies, and I thought that I could still do the pacifist route because I was still level 1. Because you need, I don't know the number exactly, but I think you needed like 20 experience to gain to level 2. But I had 4 or something, so I played the entire game at level 1, thinking I could do the pacifist route, when really I had already locked myself out of it by killing 2 enemies in the first dungeon. And so when I realized that, I was a little mad, but I still beat the game, and and got the sort of normal ending, and was impressed. Like this is a good video game. This is a very unique and cool RPG, but it didn't have a lasting impression with me, and I am a little bit alarmed at the community surrounding it.
That
last point, I agree with.
Yeah, it's fairly easy to block out, I think, and like I think it's disappointing that the memification of it is what like pervades, because like I played it when it first came out, and then I played the Switch port maybe 2.5 years later, I think, and I'd forgotten so much of what made that game important just because of the message that people like seem to take out of it and like spin into its own like community, which is, communities do things like that. They build relationships with each other by making, like, that's one thing they do is they make jokes and things and take certain parts out of that game. But there are people there, and I think, like, again, it's like on an emotional level. I think there are so few games that have reached that same emotional level as Undertale did for me, that like it's so important in terms of like I get why you mean. I know you don't like the word underrated, and I know you used it, and I do understand that. But like,
yeah, and I should make it clear. I don't like overrated or underrated, yes, because it assumes a base level of rating, and that in turn is subjective. So overrated and underrated are, I think, almost meaningless. But I just used one to try and make a point. So
yeah.
So right, my bad.
I do think its argument is like justified. Like it's. Yeah, I've not played anything. I haven't still really played anything else like it, and a lot of the games that try to be like it don't really succeed and come across as kind of, again, leaning too much into the meta-narrative stuff, which I'm less fond of. But yeah, those characters, the combat, and the music, and I have done the genocide route, not beaten, but have watched the end.
Yeah, I've watched the end of that. That's a challenging looking boss fight.
Yeah, very. Yeah, I think it's all very, very smart, basically.
Yeah, no disagreement here. I like Undertale, but I don't know. I guess I was just in my feelings and decided to cut it. But I still have a cut to make. You know what? This is reasoning we haven't really done yet. But I don't know if we need certain games on this list that are already on the 2016 list.
Oh, no.
So, for that reason, I think I am going to cut Danganronpa.
That's not where I was expecting to go at all, actually.
Yeah, because I thought you were going to come after P5R, but...
well...
Oh, no.
The thing... You already said Danganronpa.
Yeah, no, I said Danganronpa. And the thing is, Danganronpa is a...
I'm vetoing.
Okay. It's a visual novel I like a lot, but when I think of like visual novels with that sort of grisly aesthetic, I mean I think of 999 and VLR, and 999 already being on the list. I'm not sure we needed Danganronpa, but okay, it's Saved by the Bell. Which was rung by Peter Triezenberg.
Yeah, sorry. I hear you on 999 and VLR. I love those games. They're magnificent visual novels. But when Danganronpa, playing Danganronpa 1 and 2 for the podcast, that was some of the best gaming narrative I've ever experienced.
It was really fun talking to you and Alana about those as we were playing them.
Oh my god. I mean, Danganronpa 2 I still hold up as like, that was a roller coaster ride. But
Danganronpa 2 is probably my favorite in the series. I mean, is
Mine
it weird that I always like the second one the best?
You know what? That's the second one. Sometimes they work out a lot of issues.
Bricks back. I get it.
Yeah, Mass Effect 2, but not Dragon Age 2. That's or The Witcher 2. So okay, I guess
Dragon Quest 2, yeah.
Or Dragon Quest 2, but definitely Shadow Hearts 2.
Or Ghostbusters 2, or Men in Black 2, or wait, what?
Back to the Future 2 though. That's a pretty good one.
Back to the Future 2 rules. That movie's great.
Mm-hmm.
But stay on target.
Right. Okay.
Danganronpa's internet fame is the reason why I put it on my list, though, because not only do I think it's a magnificent visual novel / adventure game, but also the cultural ubiquity of Danganronpa in like early aughts Tumblr culture was really something.
I was not expecting to hear the words early aughts Tumblr culture on this podcast.
Yeah, I kind of want to scrub that out.
But here we are. No, I'm leaving it. I'm editing this episode. It's staying in.
Yeah, I mean, had you told me a few months ago, had you made this argument for Danganronpa 1 a few months ago, I would have been like, I played the game, it's fine, I don't really care much about it. My students love this game. Like Danganronpa,
really, and you're teaching middle school or early high school students, right?
I was going to say that's a little surprising to mind you too.
Middle schoolers
older.
The middle schoolers that I've had, and it's not just been like, oh, it's one class and there's one kid in one class who tells them about it. Like I have had multiple students in multiple different classes at multiple different schools when I was bouncing around subbing that have talked about Danganronpa.
Really?
And I've been like, why do you know about that? And it's a big thing. It's big.
Are they watching the anime or like playing it on PC?
No, they're into the games.
They're into the games. They're watching people stream it. They're watching the anime. Like it's out here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Eva, because that is that is one of the things about Danganronpa is that it's sort of hit that weird Five Nights at Freddy's, Undertale, like that level of cultural ubiquity through internet culture, to the point that, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is before Undertale, like people were simping for Nagito, like it was this was totally a thing. So it's for that reason, I think that Danganronpa deserves a spot because it has had a impact that has spread beyond like normal video game audiences.
Straight up, I was running a quiz for students yesterday, and they were all picking their nicknames, and one of them picked Celestia Ludenberg. So it's there.
I first heard about Danganronpa. I think it was a Kotaku article reporting on either Dengeki PlayStation or Famitsu. Basically, like right when the PSP was dying, one of the Japanese publications was having everyone vote on what the best PSP game was, and I believe Danganronpa 1 and 2 were two of the top three. And I saw this list being a PSP enthusiast and saying, "What the f?" Because I had not heard of these at all. But then it's like, Japanese teenagers locked in a space, murder mystery, whodunit. This sounds amazing. I definitely need to play these. And I think maybe a year later they announced that they were going to release them, release the Vita versions in English. So I think I like heard about him in 2009, then played him in 2011, 2012 is sort of my timeline with it. And I loved them in the moment. They're really good. I think if I am telling people about visual novels with a subtext of violence from around this time, I am going with the 999 VLR trilogy and not Danganronpa. But this podcast needs to move along, and I still have to cut something. So let me figure this out.
We are all out of vetoes. Alana has.
No, Alana has the vetoes. Oh no! So do I dare attack Alana's list? No, I don't want to do that.
You can attack my list. There's very few things I would veto actually on my own list right now. So
attacking the throne god.
I'm looking at these, and I have played literally everything on the list except one. But it would feel very, very cruel to Eva to pick that one.
I know what one is. Then,
yeah. It's not that hard to figure out if you have the list in front of you as we do. So I'm not gonna cut that. Oh.
I mean, if that is the way it goes, I can give it a nice eulogy. But.
No, I think all right. I'm not cutting this, but Disco Elysium is interesting and fascinating to me. So I think I don't want to cut it because I would like that discussion, whether it's being cut or being locked in or whatever, to happen later. So okay. I'm passing on doing anything to Disco Elysium right now, and just trying to think of what is maybe the game that I care about the least among the rest here. Landing on Phantasy Star 4.
I thought you would. I'm not gonna veto it though. Go for it.
That's where I was gonna go next.
Phantasy Star 4 is good. It is a good video game. I played it last year for the podcast. You can listen to me play through my first single player Genesis game to completion for the first time ever and enjoy myself. But it's a merely very good 16-bit RPG, and I think that there is either something more interesting or something straight up better among the other games in the combined list. That's it.
I mean, the interesting thing about Phantasy Star 4 to me is that when we're talking about like those anime cutscene type things and like just like a lot of the storytelling beats that it has, I think they're really fascinating. But at the end of the day, I think the story is good and it's fun. But it's not like transcendent in the way that other games on this list are. It's a little grindy for me. You know what? Honestly, my biggest problem with that game was the spell names.
The spell names. There's no way to figure out what they do unless you use them multiple times in battle and then do some real big brain math because it's pretty. It's pretty opaque about how spell names work.
Or just you have GameFAQs open the whole time because it's the only way you can remember anything about that game.
It was multiple tabs on the wiki for me.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's a good game. I think it's a fun game. I enjoyed it. I played it, I don't know, like right before I joined the site. I'd never played it before on some collection or something. And I enjoyed it, and I think the music's fun, and it's a good game, but there are others in the list that I think are probably more deserving.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Again, it's like in a similar way to like Peter putting Skyrim on his list. Not that I dislike Phantasy Star 4. In fact, I really, 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 really like it. Sega does not get enough rep among a lot of RPG discussions, and often Phantasy Star 4 is left to the side. But actually, I think it's pretty important alongside like other contemporaries around 93 to 95. The combat is fine. It just feels like a really nice, like everything fits together really well. Like it doesn't do any one thing spectacularly, but everything it does do is kind of just right for me, and especially at the time, that I think like it is very important. And those cutscenes, those anime panels that come up are really cool. I love the music. I genuinely really like the characters, which until I played Dragon Quest IV, I don't really think I'd ever loved, and maybe Final Fantasy IV, I suppose, as well. There's not really a cast of characters I've liked from an RPG earlier than it, other than those two examples. So, yeah, I think I wish Sega was included in the conversation more, which is why I kind of threw it in there. I do think it's a very important game, but I absolutely understand that it also came out before Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger and other Super Nintendo RPGs, and I kind of understand why it's forgotten about a little bit. I'm a little sad, but yeah, I'm not going to fight again.
It is a really good cast. I mean, Rika and Raja are the best. Are two of my favorites, or they are my two favorites from when I played it last year. But again, this was strictly an elimination question. I didn't want to cut Disco Elysium, and it's probably my least special feeling game among all the ones left. That was my only reason. Because Phantasy Star 4 is genuinely good. Like I wouldn't have been upset if it made the 20.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable game.
Mm-hmm. I played it on the Genesis Mini or Sega Genesis Classic last year. I think I bought that machine for around $35 or $40, and Phantasy Star 4 and that fabulous Yuzo Koshiro menu music justified the purchase. But Zach, we have one more cut to make in this round before we do another round of locks and then do a much less organized system of cutting. It's up to you. So you have, at least if my math is right, 18. You have 17 games here to deal with, and not make it 16.
I'm going to choose a game that I don't really like, but that I think is... I have to do it. I'm sorry. Breath of the Wild. Cut.
Boo.
Now, there is one last chance for a veto. Alana, do you want to save Breath of the Wild, or is this going to be the last cut of the round?
I hate to not use my veto, but no, I'm not going to veto.
Goodbye, Breath of the Wild.
Dang.
I'm so disappointed in all
Breath
of
of
you.
the Wild was hanging by a thread, and Alana's like, let it fall.
Yeah.
Alana, long live the king.
It's sort of similar to Yakuza 0. I put about 10 hours into Breath of the Wild, and I feel like I got a pretty good feel for what the game was. And I didn't think it was that fun. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, like the open vistas stuff, I'm like, I don't know, I can go play Xenoblade, and I can go see some open vistas there. I know it's not as open, and you don't have quite as much freedom, but, like, I just actually don't care that much about those things. I thought that the weapon breaking system was incredibly annoying. I thought that the story was okay, but, like, the directionlessness of it, the dungeons or lack thereof, I thought were kind of silly. I hate to say this I probably should get, like, my credentials revoked as a member of RPG fan, but I actually just don't like Breath of the Wild very much. I don't think it's a very fun game. I don't love 3D Zelda in general. Like, only one I've played to completion is Ocarina of Time. And I don't love it. And so that's my cut.
That's fine. I get it. I know. But and you're not wrong about a few things. Like, I do think the weapon durability system is really obnoxious. I understand why it's there, but I hope it does not come back in the sequel. And I feel like they could have done a better job of balancing it, so at least some of your better weapons are maybe a little more durable than a wet tissue paper. But for my money, and I also should point out that I also love 3D Zelda, and in fact, I prefer 3D Zelda to 2D Zelda in most cases. I just really like this. I just like that style of game. But Breath of the Wild, though, is special because I think that in what it gives up and the Zelda formula, you no longer have to visit dungeons in a set order. You don't have to use specific items to clear said dungeons. And the dungeons are a little samey and uniform. Again, totally legit criticism. I think what it's able to do with the tools it gives you from the outset and how those play into not just dungeon and shrine puzzles, but also just environmental puzzles, figuring out how to traverse the world, coming up with all these crazy the fact that people are still able to use the game's physics to do these absolutely crazy stunts, like stopping time, hitting a rock a bunch of times, climbing on the rock, and using that to, like, propel them halfway across the map.
Yeah, the combination of the stasis spell and bombs and the glider, which are 3 of maybe the 7 fundamental skills you use in the game, just create so many shenanigans that you could go on YouTube for days just seeing what the community's developed with that.
And in that aspect alone, I think it's one of the most interesting open world games out there, because not just because of you have freedom to explore, but you have freedom in how you explore. You are you are presented with you are given a dot on the map to go to, and how you get there is entirely up to you, and there are tons of things you'll find along the way. Tons of stories you might encounter, stories you'll make for yourself. And I also think that Breath of the Wild, not to wax poetic too much more, but that pervasive sense of melancholy in this ruined version of Hyrule. The fact that Nintendo, obviously, the Zelda timeline is absolute nonsense, but the fact that all roads lead to this calamity, this is the end point of all of the timelines, and as a result, you have this mishmash of like the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch from Ocarina of Time and things like that. The really soft piano that trickles in. The world is beautiful, but it's also dying in a way. And I don't know. I really connected strongly with that.
Peter, you and I had a Zelda argument 5 years ago, where and this is 2016, before Breath of the Wild was in the wild. You prefer 3D Zelda. I prefer 2D Zelda. You were caping hard for Twilight Princess, and I was caping hard for A Link Between Worlds, which didn't work out for either of us really, because neither game made the top 10. And I think now our tastes are roughly still the same. I mean, my favorite Zelda is still Link Between Worlds, and you still prefer 3D Zelda. But now we're more united in our feelings, because I think Breath of the Wild is a triumph. It is the best premise, or I should say, the best promise of totally non-linear, you're dropped in a world, figure it out, that Zelda's ever done since Zelda 1 on the NES. And the way it was able to capture that, and also create some incredible story moments, some incredible sort of naturally occurring gameplay moments. The community's developed incredible tricks around gameplay, like you mentioned. The sense of discovery for finding shrines is so powerful in Breath of the Wild that me finding a new shrine made me about as excited as I've ever been with that RPG feeling of finding a new treasure chest or learning a new skill. Like that's about as good as it gets in Breath of the Wild. So I love Breath of the Wild. I said this before. I mentioned this before. I think it's a top 3 Zelda for me. So I would have liked to talk about it later in this episode or next episode, but Alana let it fall.
I actually feel really guilty because it's probably my favorite Zelda game, and I don't like 3D Zelda, which is probably what surprised me most about why I loved it. Like, nearly 100 hours of being it. I've done all the shrines and everything, and like...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I feel really strongly about it, but I don't think I feel really strongly about it for this conversation, and I feel like it's a case of, like, what Zelda games are there. My second favorite Zelda game is A Link to the Past, and that's still there. And I think that might be the first Zelda game I would recommend somebody personally, and I think it's me splitting hairs. It's bad, because maybe I should use it, but... I don't know. There's something in me that tells me not to, which is the weakest argument I can give.
It's the best argument you can give. Because I agree.
The only rule is follow your heart, and that is what you're doing, and I will not stop you.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's the only open world game that's not Xenoblade that I have ever loved, ever.
I mean... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I've stopped.
I mean, I think when we're talking about like open world games that Monolith has worked on, I'd rather play Xenoblade Cross 100 times out of 100 over Breath of the Wild. I mean, it does a lot of the things that you guys are talking about, but it also like blends it with like combat that's, I don't know, actually interesting, and like in a way that like in a storytelling way that works for me. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound dismissive.
Are the mechs breakable in Xenoblade Chronicles Cross?
The skills are not breakable that I remember. And I just think that the feeling of exploration in that game is more fun. And the combat is deep. It's not quite like Xenoblade 2 complicated, but it's deeper than Xenoblade 1. I mean, like, I hate to talk about a game by comparing it to another game, but the fact that Monolith worked on both sort of, I feel like, works into it. And I feel like in terms of like pure open world experiences, those are the two games that I can think of, and I would strongly prefer one to the other.
All right, well, I think that's all she wrote on our series of cuts for this episode. So we have a few more minutes to be positive, 5 locks, they cannot be vetoed, and these next 5 games will be definitely on the discussion table for the next episode. And again, snake draft format, we're going to go in the reverse order of our cuts. So Zach, you are on deck again. What is going to be the next lock into the final 20?
So I'm afraid I've made some people angry. So I'm going to lock Suikoden 2.
Suikoden 2 is awesome. We did 2 episodes on it in 2018. I have zero qualms of it making the top 10 or top 20. I nothing else to say here.
Yep. An agreement. Total agreement.
I'm also in agreement.
So that's
Are you sure?
That's
Are you
3
sure
people.
Are you sure you can still take that back? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Suikoden 2 is the best game in the Suikoden series, which is my favorite series overall. I think that the character dynamics there are fantastic. It manages to overcome a wonky, bad translation and still make us connect and care about people. Lots of people. Combat snappy. I feel like on this podcast alone, let alone an RPG fan at large, I have waxed not very poetically about how much I love Suikoden 2. And I want to make sure it makes it through to the next conversation.
Totally fair. Alana, I know you like Suikoden 2. How about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add at this point. It's one of my 5 favorite games ever, and I played it on that podcast as well. So, yeah, I think it's remarkably good. And yeah, let's save it for later, I think.
Good idea. We will talk about Suikoden 2 for certain in the next episode. So for now, I will make a lock. And there's a lot of good games here. You know what I think we should also save for the next episode? Is which Lunar game makes the top 10.
Yes. This is my favorite lock. I almost locked this, actually.
So Lunar 2 Eternal Blue is my lock here. I like Lunar 1 and 2 a lot. I don't like other Lunar games, so for as far as I'm concerned, that is a 2-game series. Yeah. But I love Lunar 2, in part because of it's that spirit of early 90s anime RPG that is you know, a little bit of Phantasy Star, a little bit of Tales of Phantasia, but just maybe the best version of one of those. But also, the cast is so good, and I prefer the cast of Lunar 2 to Lunar the Silver Star, because even though it's less romantic and less kissing, and I love kissing in JRPGs, but like Jean's transformation from dancer to martial artist, Ron Farr being the best drunk healer doofus of all time, with a surprisingly dark backstory. Everything about Leo, and it also has.
What about Mysterio?
About who? Sorry.
Isn't his alternate name Mysterio? Is that am I mistaken on that one?
What are you talking about? Leo and Mysterio are 2 different characters.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot.
You silly Billy. But the and also it has my favorite epilogue of any RPG of all time, because the ending of the main game, you fight a big bad dude named Zohar and things are a little sad, and then the epilogue is you get to revisit the world with a completed team and more freedom than at any other point in the game. You get new equipment and new skills and new stuff from revisiting almost every point, and you can not really undo, but like make the bad ending into a glad ending by completing all the objectives in the epilogue. I'm avoiding some spoilers here, in a way that made me cry happy tears when I first played Lunar 2 many years ago. So I like, for being an awesome version of that kind of game, and for having my favorite epilogue in any RPG ever, I'm locking it in. That's all.
I mean, it's a lovely game, and I think if there's one thing that I think it does much better, it's the way it inverts the narrative from the first one. I think is really fascinating, and I also love Hiro and Lucia's love story. I think it's the most moving of all of them.
I like Hiro and Lucia a lot, but I almost think that like the 4 other characters in the main 6 are just so great that I almost think Hiro's a little too boring.
Leo alone makes this game belong in the top 10.
Yeah, like Ron Farr, Leo, and Jean are awesome, but the entire cast of Lunar 2 and is great, and it's a very well written, fun game. But it's that epilogue that moves it from excellent to one of my all time favorites. So, but we're gonna have, I think, Zach, we're gonna have a Lunar 1 versus Lunar 2 battle royale next episode.
I'm down for it. Except for I'm happy no matter how it goes. So.
Right, but let's make some other people happy this time. Peter, I don't think you've played quite as much Lunar as Zachary, but you definitely are allowed to make a lock now. What is it going to be?
I have played 0 Lunar in my life. I don't think anyone's going to be upset with me locking Final Fantasy XIV.
So angry. I'm furious.
You. But yeah, 14 is amazing. It's a game I never thought I was going to get into, but I am now high-key obsessed with, like, roughly 800 hours later. And, yeah, it's definitely, if I had to pick an essential game to define Final Fantasy, the series, and at modern MMORPGs, yeah, 14 is just magnificent.
I mean, all 5 of us are FF14 players in various stages of their FF14 career. So it was on 4 of our lists of our submitting 10 lists, which is one big reason why it went from 50 submissions to 35 games. And I'll say it. The one person that didn't vote for FF14 was me, because I was pretty sure other people were going to vote for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's total recency bias from me, I'm afraid. It's literally all I'm playing at the moment, other than review stuff. And yeah, I want to save some discussion for it for next time. But like, if I'm gonna recommend an MMO to anybody, it will be this 110%, nothing else. Like. There is nothing like I think the thing that like sets it apart from other MMOs is just how incredibly well written it is and how consistent it is, and like just how I don't know, like there's such a really special, like we've talked about community quite a lot actually on this podcast for a couple of games in a negative way, and I really want to stress that like there are always good aspects to like communities. The Final Fantasy XIV community
it's the best community,
phenomenal in so many different ways. Like I was so terrified to come back to that game, and like I've had nothing but good experiences from people I don't know, from people I play with, from random people, and it's like it's joyous. And like, yeah, if this is not in the top 10, I will be 1, surprised, and 2, I might resign, maybe. I don't know.
I might have spent more time on this game than anyone else in the podcast, and I also think
you and I didn't know each other in 2016, buddy. But...
At least nowadays, I think I probably do. And I think that along with everything else you guys have said, like the accessibility of it, I think is really important too, and like the way that it sort of scales to like the kinds of experiences that you want. Like I'll admit that, like I don't know, when I run like the same dungeon 50 times and it's very easy for me, that annoys me a little bit. But like I also appreciate that like they allow people to move through it, but they also give you these other experiences. Like I know I'm never going to beat Alex Ultimate, but like living somewhere between like Extreme and Ultimate is like fun for me. But like for other people, they just want to play the story, and that's great. And I was an MMO hater mostly because I had friends who dropped out of college because of WoW, and I say friends like I mean like 5. So I was afraid of MMOs, but like I think this game is just delightful and great. And I was on vacation recently. The first thing I did when I walked in the door was I booted up Final Fantasy XIV and ran a dungeon, and I felt at home as soon as I did it.
It's turning into like part of my morning routine, which is kind of scary, but also like awesome.
I shared Zach's trepidation with MMOs because again, World of Warcraft came out in 2004, right when I was starting college, and I know I remember at least one time where someone missed a wedding because of a scheduled raid, and so it's like I don't want to be that person, so I'm never going to play an MMO. But when I finally got into FF14, it became one of my favorite games. It's that powerful.
I'm just like, oh, I understand now.
It's like, oh, now I get it.
Not to that extent.
Maybe I'll try to bring a laptop to the hotel so I don't miss my roulettes on my cousin's wedding, but I get it.
Yeah. So, dear listeners, if it's not enough of an endorsement from all 5 of us, make sure you play Final Fantasy XIV the award-winning MMORPG that is free up to level 60 and includes the expansion pack Heavensward.
It has
The
won
best expansion, no less.
It has won RPG Fans Game of the Year twice over the past 8 years or so.
Yep, we had a dedicated Final Fantasy XIV award for continued excellence at being Final Fantasy XIV at several E3s because it always featured prominently in our coverage.
All right, so we've done enough dodging AoEs. Eva, it is your turn to lock one final game of this round. Or I'm sorry, your final game of this round. Then Alana after you.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Disco Elysium. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
So Disco Elysium. I just recently reviewed it as well, and this is the most recent game on our list. This is some of my favorite writing, not just in a video game, but just in general that I've come across. It's beautiful. I love the way that this game is written. It's occasionally verbose. There are altogether too many words in this, but when this game is firing on all cylinders, there really isn't anything better in terms of the writing. And this game is not an aesthetic or mechanical slouch either. The painterly world that they have in this fictional setting of Revachol is beautiful. It's so wondrously detailed. It is a brilliant yet contained open world. The music is a little sparse but fits it perfectly. And the character writing is just magnificent at times. Some of these characters are some of my favorites that I've come across in games, like your Lieutenant Kim Kitsuragi, who if anyone's played it, they're like, I would die for this man. He is amazing. He is an amazing character, and it is and for all of the things that it's trying to do, for how narratively, mechanically, even ambitious in its UI it is, this game is hilarious. Like, there are moments that I've never laughed harder at a game than at this one. Like when I talked on Random about this, there was this man who I could not get past through conventional means, so I either had to subscribe to his theory of racism, which didn't want to do. So instead, I did a roundhouse kick while yelling "Disco Inferno" and knocking him out.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
So, it's like, if that's not a ringing endorsement for the type of choices that you can be presented in this game and just how funny it can be, it is a perfect mass media product that will probably also make you more of a commie if you aren't one already.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game that I've wanted to play for years, and I will say all of your writing is always amazing, Eva, but like your review of this game was just fabulous and made me want to play it like 10 times more, which is impressive. So, yeah. I wish I could say anything about it except for I desperately want to play it.
I am very interested in Disco Elysium, and I own a copy of it that I got on a Steam sale some time ago. So, Eva, I don't have a real opinion from experience on Disco Elysium now, but I pledge to you that I will play it for a few hours before our next recording, so I can either help you or disrupt your case for it in the next episode, depending on my feelings. But I do want to play it, so I will start it before we do the next episode.
I haven't played it myself, but if the opening monologue doesn't hook you, then I don't know what will.
Just a final note, the narration of all these voices and such that you have in your head is done by one person. His name is Lenville Brown, and I would just like to heap all the praise in the world on this person and basically all of the voice casting in it. So
sweet. So that's 9 locks down, 1 to go, and Alana, it's your call. What is the last game that is going to be guaranteed to be discussed next episode?
Well, I think there's a few obvious ones that I'm going to let us battle over, which I think are obviously going to make it. But given some earlier discussions, I think I've got to let Dragon Quest XI on the top 10, or at least the lock-in. Yeah, we've already spoken about it on the episode, so I'm not going to go into it too much more. But I think it's probably going to have to fight a little bit more than some of the other games on this list, and it absolutely should be there. And that's all I want to say about it, really.
Alana, I don't know if this is a thank you for me locking Skies of Arcadia earlier, but thank you.
Yes. Also
Not specifically, but I'll take it.
Dragon Quest XI is wonderful and one of my favorite games, and I'm glad that I didn't have to argue it for round 5. Thank you, Alana.
No problem.
We already did talk about Dragon Quest XI quite a bit when it was cut and vetoed. So we will leave these 10 alone for now. Those 10 are automatically locked to the next round: Lunar the Silver Star, Skies of Arcadia, The World Ends With You, Bloodborne, Stardew Valley, Suikoden 2, Lunar Tour to Eternal Blue, Final Fantasy XIV, Disco Elysium, Dragon Quest XI. So that means we have 15 games left for the last 10 slots. So we can view this as doing 10 more locks or 5 more cuts, however you want the math to work out. But those 15 are, some of which we have discussed and some of which we haven't yet: Danganronpa, Earthbound, Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy IX, Mother 3, Nier Automata, Okami, Persona 5 Royal, Pokemon Black and White, Tales of the Abyss, Transistor, Trails in the Sky First Chapter, Undertale, Vagrant Story, Zelda: A Link to the Past. And, alright, I'm going to make an executive decision here. There is one game on that list of 15 that was on 4 people's list, and I think is the easiest auto lock that we could make without really fighting over it, and that's Nier Automata. Is there anyone opposed to me putting it on the 20 locks right now?
No way.
None of us locked it. None of us vetoed it.
Yep,
because we're all like, "Yep, it's brilliant."
Yep, and it's on the list. So now we have 5 cuts to make or 9 locks to make. Is there anyone that wants to make a proposal for a lock or a cut?
I would like to propose Mother 3. I would like to propose a double. We lock Mother 3 and cut Earthbound.
This is the one I'm struggling with the most, because they're both so important in different ways. I prefer Mother 3, but yeah.
I prefer Earthbound, but if it was my sole decision, I would say lock both of them and have that discussion next episode.
So what else would you cut from that list?
Maybe one of the ones I tried to cut last round. Danganronpa, Undertale. I really think.
Story.
Sorry, maybe, but staying in the motherland for a minute. I think Earthbound and Mother 3 are both really important. We've covered both of them on the podcast, and I really like both. But is there anyone besides me that is willing to fight for Earthbound?
I struggled with this choice because I knew I was going to pick one of them. But to me, like, Earthbound is a little more subversive in like a sort of video game kind of way, but Mother 3 is subversive in like more important ways to me. And I think the story is significantly more emotional. I prefer the combat. I love Earthbound. It's a lovely game. If I was going to personally make a list of 20, they would both be on it, and I would maybe get rid of, I don't know, some things we put on it last time. But I would go hard for Mother 3. I would go significantly less hard for Earthbound, personally.
Yeah, me too.
Mother 3 was on two people's lists, but there was significant support for it, even for the people that didn't have it on their list. Peter, what's your thoughts on Earthbound versus Mother 3? Lock one or lock both? Because I don't think both are getting cut, if you don't mind my saying.
I would lock Mother 3 if I had to choose. And being completely honest, this is not an informed decision. I have played 30 minutes of Earthbound and 0 minutes of Mother 3.
Oh, whoa. I didn't know that about you, Peter. We were going to have a discussion after the podcast.
It's on the list. I've tried to play Earthbound a couple times, and I just never got around to it. Got past that opening section.
Mm-hmm.
And I will play Mother 3 if it ever gets officially localized.
The thing is, if Mother 3 ever gets officially localized, I will probably buy it and not play it, because I don't know if I want to go through that ending sequence again.
Right. I'll probably wind up playing it on my own time, through other means, because I know how it goes, the meme. But more than anything, in the immortal words of Clancy Brown, there can be only one. So of the two, I feel like Locking Mother 3 would make more sense.
Okay, again, I want this episode to be less than 3.5 hours, so I'm going to make another executive decision. We are going to lock Mother 3, and we're going to leave Earthbound on the list for now, but it is in danger of being cut. Is anyone opposed to that?
Nope.
That's fine.
All right, but Earthbound, you're on notice, and I'm saying that as the one person that got you on this list. Someone else. Do we have a proposal for a cut or a lock in this list of now 13? I guess
I have 3 proposals for a cut. None of them are on my list. No offense to anybody. I'm just thinking about ones. Vagrant Story, I don't know. I haven't played it, but I know it's interesting. FC, to me, like all Kaseki games, and I've played, I don't know, maybe 10 hours of FC. It's fine. But like all Kaseki games are like, to me, like good RPGs. Are they great? Like Transcendent ones, maybe SC is, maybe Third Chapter is. I don't think anybody would really argue that FC is, except as sort of an entry point into the series where you could get to what most people would argue are better games. And to me, that kind of puts it on the block a little bit.
It's really the collective world-building experience, I think,
right,
that those games do so well. Yeah.
I was going to say maybe Okami. I mean, I like Okami. I just think it's... I think there are some things about it that are amazing, but overall, I think that there are better experiences that are similar. And those will be my 3 proposals, but I don't know.
I won't fight about FC because I agree. Like the reason I kept it on here is because, again, I think it is the ideal entry point, and it's the only one of the games that we discussed that was standalone. But I won't fight you on that. I also love Okami, but that game is too dang long.
Yeah, Okami is like a 45-hour game that I think they should have tried to design it into being a tighter 30 hours. But I think it's really, really strong. I have made the joke that it's my favorite 3D Zelda for several years, actually, and until Breath of the Wild happened. But Okami is sort of uniquely beautiful and has some really cool gameplay ideas. That ukiyo-e and sumiyo-e art style is really gorgeous. I don't know enough about the differences between those styles to make an informed call on which Okami is. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I'm culturally ignorant. But I really like Okami. I'm not going to lock it or cut it yet, I think. But of those 3 that Zach proposed, I think the one I care about the least is Trails. And I would feel a little bad not having a Falcom game in our 20, but I like Okami and Vagrant Story do some very unique and powerful things. Like Vagrant Stories, its textures haven't aged great, but things like its cinematography and art direction feel a decade ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely nothing else like Vagrant Story, and like. Right. It's just like I played it a long, long time ago, and like it still strikes me how good that game looks in inverted commas because of the way it does, as you said, like cinematography. Like there's nothing else like it, and it is extremely hard to get into at times. Like playing it
can be a struggle, but the things like just how powerful the drama is. And the several things it does excellently well is really something. I played it for the podcast a while ago with you, Eva, and Eva, you're the one that got it on the list here. And I don't know. I mean, there's definitely 10 games I care more about Vagrant Story on our combined list of 27 or however many are left, maybe 25 now. But I think I want to have a Vagrant Story discussion next episode. I would put it on our 20.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This game, I will like. I'm not sure if I'll even fight for it for being in the Essential 10 because this game is inaccessible. In terms of like, I mean, you can download PSN. Like getting it is not terrible, but in terms of getting to grips with its mechanics, is pretty ridiculous. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it is a difficult game. And it has some things that I absolutely loathe about it, like its backtracking in some cases, and its block puzzles are some of the worst ever designed in a game. Were they to take it out, I would push through this game on basically every level, but that is a terrible part of it. I would love to see it be locked. I'm not going to fight terribly if it isn't, though, despite my massive amount of love and appreciation for it.
Okay, so going back to the other two Zach suggested, who among us would prefer to cut Okami? Yes, no on cutting Okami. I think right now my vote is a no. What else? What else do we have?
I don't want to cut Okami. I think Okami's worth discussing more.
I don't really like it that much, but I'm coming from someone who doesn't really like 3D Zelda games. I would probably put it on yes potentially for cutting.
Okay,
it's too long, and I love what it does. I love so much of what it does, but I hit 20 hours and was done. I really just lost. I don't know why. It was probably a wrong time in my life, like many games in the mid-2000s were, but like, yeah, I just don't know if I can make a case for it other than like what it does aesthetically, personally.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about it, because I really I prefer 2D Zelda to 3D Zelda, but I like a lot of 3D action games, and I liked Okami, but I guess I lasted a little longer than you. I was really starting to flag around the 30-hour mark.
It's around where I flagged on it too,
and I did power through to the end. But I do feel like that game is a little too long. But that's my biggest complaint about it. So we have two no's to cutting and one yes to cutting. Zach and Eva, what are your feelings?
I mean, I would say yes, just because of the strength of everything else on the list. It's not that I don't think it's a good game. It's just that we're starting to get into the lots of games that I like a lot.
Get into the weeds here. And Eva...
Yeah. Oh, I won't drag this out too much. Yeah, we can cut it. I put it on my list, but I think it's an amazing game. As opposed to, it seems like everyone has this issue with it, and I'm not saying I'm special. I didn't think it was too long. I had a great time with it. The ending is a little bit too JRPG, but it wasn't because of its length necessarily. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to cut. I think it's possibly on a purely aesthetic level, the greatest visual accomplishment in video games. This is a game that will never age, honestly. It is 15 years old now, and even brought onto 4K on the PS4 Pro or PS5 or Xbox. Well, I don't know if it's on Xbox Series, but it still looks magnificent, and it never will stop being that. So
Capcom has ported it over and over, and I ended up playing it on PS3 many years ago, and it there was a zero. I don't know what the right term is, like zero fidelity loss. This game looked great on the PS2, looks great on the PS3. I'm sure it looks great on PS4 and Switch and what have you. It is a incredible visual accomplishment of a game. That's for damn sure.
Wherever it goes, basically, it's the best looking game on that system, in my opinion. But yeah.
I will actually offer one of my items on the list as a sacrifice, just for the sake of brevity.
Oh.
I like Pokemon Black and White a lot. And I think that a Pokemon game would be a good thing to have on this list. But I'm willing to put it up there for discussion to be cut so we can move along.
I'm kind of okay with the idea of a Pokemon game in the top 20. So which is why I didn't target it for a cut in the first 4 rounds.
Even as a person who's never played a Pokemon game, I think a Pokemon game probably belongs in the conversation.
I don't know I don't really have too much to say, but I often find Pokemon a difficult sell as an RPG sometimes to people. And I know this isn't solely RPG focused, but and Black and White is one of my 2 favorite games in the series. But
mine too, yeah.
Yeah, it's it's always a really difficult sell, and I do think it probably does deserve it to be in the conversation in some way. It's a tough one.
I will vote to cut Sky FC if we're still moving on that discussion.
I think I want to cut Sky FC.
Yeah, let's go for it. I think.
Zach or Eva, are there any objections to cutting Trails in the Sky FC?
It was my suggestion, so nope.
Later, with apologies to Kiseki fans everywhere.
Yeah, but at least we're not making Nikki cry.
Nikki's favorite fictional characters in Pokemon Black and White.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. If you guys think we should keep it, I'm not opposed to it. I love Pokemon.
There's a few other games I'd cut over it, certainly.
Me too, I think.
I would probably cut Persona 5 Royal over it, actually, considering we've got Persona 4 Golden in there, and if maybe Persona 4 Golden wasn't there, although I guess this is Persona 5 as a whole. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel particularly strongly about Persona 5 anymore, and I know that the argument will be is that like it is probably the best turn-based RPG at the moment, like even over Dragon Quest XI, and stylistically it's amazing.
I wouldn't say it's better than Dragon Quest XI personally, but stylistically, it is one of the best-looking JRPGs that's ever happened, and its gameplay is so snappy and crisp that it's one of the best looking and best playing JRPGs ever, full stop. But I just think its story falls flat in several places, which is why it's not my favorite Persona game.
Curious if it was on your list. I know you've played P5 Royal, because if it was just Persona 5, I would vote to cut, but I don't know. Like with Royal, what distinguishes it?
So with Persona 5 Royal, everything that basically is in the game from that's only in Royal is really narratively interesting, and the increase in the mechanical complexity from some things, it makes it a little bit easier. But if you're looking for a maximalist single-player RPG, this is really where you go to. It is ridiculously stylish. It's extremely snappy in its combat. The characters are really lovable in a lot of cases. If Persona 4 Golden wasn't on the original list, I probably would have locked this game. But I do understand that P4 Golden is on here, and though they are of two different pieces, I think it's fine if we don't have another Persona game in our top 20, top 10. So.
I really like Persona 5, but I'm not sure it's one of my 10 favorites in the remaining list.
Yeah, it's hard, because I think I prefer Persona 5 to 4, and that's where I'm having problems.
I do too, but I just think that there are so many there are so many storytelling beats, and like the way that it oversimplifies to me like very complicated issues in a lot of cases. Persona 5, at least in my opinion, does is my biggest concern about it. But man, the style. It's such a fun game to play.
I prefer Persona 4 to 5 overall, but 5's gameplay refinements and its style are what I think are the two most striking parts about it.
Okay, so for the sake of brevity, because we, as Peter had said, for brevity, can we just move Okami to cuts? Like, can we move Okami to cuts? Can we move? Like, I'm cool with taking some of these games from my list. Okami and Vagrant Story, like, it is fine. That game is just not very accessible from a gameplay perspective. So, like, it is fine.
Well, all right. We have 4 more cuts to make after Trails in the Sky FC. I think I'm the only one that's really fighting hard for Earthbound. And looking at the rest of this list, I mean, I think I would want Final Fantasy Tactics and what else here? Maybe even also Tales of the Abyss on the list.
Really? Because I'm thinking of sacrificing that because I just don't think you can talk about it in the same breath as the rest of these games. And
it's really good though, and I kind of want to see a Tales game in the top 20.
It is, but I don't know.
It's not. I think you're right. It's probably not as good as Earthbound.
Yeah, and it's bad because we haven't really talked about a Tales game as part of it. But like, there's a lot of, in the same way that Trails has got some real like RPG tropes that are really like, I don't know, uncomfortable. Sometimes Tales does that as well, and I think like Abyss maybe it also has the gameplay aspect going against it. Like, it's not aged terribly well. It's aged better than most other Tales games, I would say. But like,
I think it's aged okay. I mean, having the free run makes it like a leap better than Tales of Symphonia, personally, for me. And I think that the story is a bit of a hard sell at first because of how annoying Luke is, but then comes into its own really strongly. I really like Tales of the Abyss, but the problem is just the competition it's going against.
Yeah, it was a wild card on my list because I like Tales a lot, but I'm actually surprised it didn't get voted off at any point. So
I was sort of avoiding talking about it, hoping it would sneak through, which it did. But it might be the end of the line. Eva, Zach, or Peter, do any of you guys have strong Tales thoughts? Because if not, then it might be time to cut it.
Never played a Tales game? It's cut.
I've only played a couple, but I want to play Tales of the Abyss. That's what I can say about it. That's what I know.
It's a good one. It's in my personal top 2, I think, for the series.
It's my favorite. Yeah. I feel bad because I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just like, yeah, I put you on there, whatever. But yeah, I just
I'm
don't
okay
think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with cutting it.
Yep,
Alana, I think we should both take one for the team and let it die.
Yep, I'm happy with that.
All right. See you later, Tales of the Abyss. So, I'm gonna try to make a positivity proposal here. I think we should move, and this is not one of the games that I picked. I think that A Link to the Past should make the top 20. We should add it to the locks.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's cool with me.
I think having a Zelda game on is good. This is one of the best Zelda games. We had a lot of Zelda discussion when we cut Link Between Worlds and Breath of the Wild, but having this one move on to the next round, I think is a good bet.
Yep, I agree.
Any objections?
Nope.
And I'm going to make a proposal that Tactics moves along as well. I know we have another Final Fantasy game on the list, but we don't have any tactical games on the first one. I think it is by far the best entry point game in terms of tactical RPGs. At least that I've played. It's got a fabulous story, fabulous music. It's an amazing game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And the only reason I was even like slightly reticent to put it on my list was because I already had 14. But man, despite the crossover, those two games are very, very different. So I would vote that it should be there.
I would argue we can move Tactics onwards, but slightly controversial suggestion. I think 9 might have to go.
Yeah, I
love FF9, but 14 and Tactics are both going ahead. And I'm sorry, though, I would pick those over 9 any day.
Absolutely.
I mean, Tactics 14, 9. 9 personally finishes third for me as well, but I would rather remove both. We have both of them go to the locks.
It's interesting because I know, like, again, we've got like a Final Fantasy game on the list. This was probably what I would have used my veto on because I love it to death. I actually think it might be the best entry point in the series in terms of the traditional games, other than maybe one other game. But I'm interested to hear what people think.
I think it's good as an entry point and good for RPG veterans or Final Fantasy veterans. It's just it's one of the best PlayStation RPGs.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to fight too hard about it. We got to get moving. So.
But do we have any objections to locking Final Fantasy Tactics at least for now?
No way. It deserves to be there. It should have been on the last list.
Yeah, I fought for a little bit on the last list. It was on my list of 10 in 2016 and 2021, so I have no objections at all, of course. We're getting there. It looks like that we only have 6 spots left and 9 games left. So we have to cut 3 here. I'll say them all out loud. Danganronpa, Earthbound, FF9, Okami, Persona 5, Pokemon Black White, Transistor, Undertale, Vagrant Story.
Eva had already volunteered to cut Okami and Vagrant Story. So we could move ahead with that and just cut one more.
But I think it's a little unfair to Eva. I mean, because those are 3 of sort of the Eva games.
I was the one who offered them up. It is fine.
All right. Eva, Okami, Transistor, Vagrant Story. Which one do you want to save?
Oh, Transistor. Yeah. Okami and Vagrant Story can go to hell for Transistor.
Wow.
I think that very noble decision of yours, Eva, I shall respect it. So Transistor is in, Vagrant Story and Okami are out.
Okay.
I want Undertale, though.
It's a lot. I agree.
I think we have one more. We have one more to cut, and I wouldn't. I think I would probably cut Undertale or Danganronpa, but and we know that Alana and Zach want Undertale. Peter and Eva, what are your thoughts on putting Undertale in?
I don't mind.
Put it in.
Undertale's a lock.
Over Danganronpa, 100%, I'm afraid. I love Danganronpa, but...
We only have one more cut to make, so Persona 5, FF10, Earthbound, Danganronpa, Pokemon, Black and White.
I think Earthbound's gotta go, dude.
Yeah.
Really? Earthbound, over Danganronpa or Pokemon Black?
Out of Danganronpa and Earthbound, personally, I would pick Danganronpa, but...
I want to have the Mother 3 versus Earthbound discussion next episode, but I think Earthbound is such a foundational Super Nintendo game.
It's also one of the hardest to get into, though. That first couple of hours are
part of the problem is part of the problem is the second town in the game is maybe the hardest part of the whole game, which is a little brutal.
I mean, here's the thing about Earthbound. I think given the current consistency of this panel, there's a 0% chance it's going to make it to the top 10 because
Mother 3
is, and three of us at least are going to go to bat for Mother 3 over the one who's going to go. I'm just being practical at this point.
I mean, the only
Earthbound is my top pick of these 5, but I think it's the least likely to move on to the final 10.
Earthbound is probably my first or second pick. It's tied with FF9, but we also have we have one Super Nintendo game in our current 20, and that's Zelda.
But we do have 2 on our previous list.
That's true. Yeah,
we've got no VNs today. Yeah, only one.
That's true. Oh yeah, there's no visual novels in our 20. That's Disco Elysium is a bit of an edge case.
It's more of a.
It has some visual novel DNA in there. Although at
this point, I think Earthbound's got to go.
See, listeners, we don't hate all Western RPGs.
Yeah, sorry.
We just only like the communist ones.
Yeah, I mean, any 5 of these games, I'm not really going to fully go to bat for, so.
I think I do love Earthbound, but I did get a bunch of games I really care about into the 20 already, and I don't dislike any of the other 4 games, not even a little bit. So I'm the only one that's really fighting for it, so Earthbound's gone.
Well, not to drag this out any longer, but Persona 5 Row, is there anyone who is I really want that to be locked? Because Sollosi, if you're fighting for Earthbound, but no one's really fighting for P5R, then
I think that its style and mechanics are extremely important.
Yeah.
The one I sort of want to cut is either Danganronpa or Pokemon Black, I guess. But I got a lot of games on the list already. I feel really, really good about the top 16 we already have. So I don't mind, especially since Eva, you volunteered to sacrifice something. I will volunteer to sacrifice Earthbound. My fight's over.
All right.
We got 20.
We got 20.
Jesus Christ!
It took us a while because we really wanted to talk about every single game on the list, which made it for long episodes. I apologize, listeners. I apologize, panelists. We're unless we can rest. This episode's maybe going to be over 2.5 hours. We'll see how the edit shakes out. But let's go over the list one last time. First of all, back in 2016, we did this original Essential 10 episode. So these 10 games were not up for discussion. They're already enshrined. That's Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Chrono Trigger, Diablo 3, Final Fantasy 6, Kingdom Hearts, Mass Effect 2, 999, Persona 4, Steambot Chronicles, and Xenoblade Chronicles. Double Chronicles at the end there. So those 10 are locked in, and they're going to be joined by 10 more, and those 10 are going to be among these 20. Lunar the Silver Star, Skies of Arcadia, The World Ends With You, Bloodborne, Stardew Valley, Suikoden 2, Lunar 2, Eternal Blue, Final Fantasy XIV, Disco Elysium, Dragon Quest XI, Nier Automata, Mother 3, Zelda A Link to the Past, Final Fantasy Tactics, Transistor, Undertale, Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc, Final Fantasy IX, Persona 5 Royal, Pokemon Black and White. Those 20 will be reduced to a list of 10 at the very end. At the very end of next week's episodes. So listeners, please look forward to that discussion next week. But before we get there, let's talk about what's happening next month on the podcast. We're doing one more episode one more episode of the Essential Ten-2, starting very soon. We're going to start thinking about recording that. But after that, we're doing 2 episodes on Hakuoki, which is a otome-style visual novel romantic adventure game that is going to be a panel of all women discussing Hakuoki for 2 episodes. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that goes, but I will not be on those episodes because I do not qualify to be on a panel of all women. But after Hakuoki, we have most of July planned out. Wait, no, I'm sorry. It is July right now. After Hakuoki, we have most of August planned out. We are doing 2 episodes on Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is one of the most requested games we've had for the podcast. Whenever RPG Fan mentions SMT3 Nocturne, anything on our social media, it gets a lot of shine. And there's a lot of SMT3 veterans and SMT3 newbies excited to play that. So a lot of them will probably be playing the recent remake. So those episodes will go up in August, but I still have to start that thing because I'm still playing Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and that game's pretty great. But I will get to SMT3 Nocturne very soon, and that will be our game for August. Also, episode 300 of the podcast is going to land in August, and we're starting to plan that out. I'm really excited. It's gonna that episode will end with a means of selecting a future RPG Fan Retro Encounter game, but I don't know how it's going to go yet because we have not recorded it yet, but plans for episode 300 are in the works. But I think that's about all for now. Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us for this very, very long episode. And thank you, panelists, for suffering with me on this long, long panel. We're going to get to another 10 next week, and I'm looking forward to it. But listeners, if you want to join in on the discussion, the best way to do so is email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on our message boards or visit our Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, Twitch. Something streaming every day, something happening every day. Please interact with us however you want to interact with us. You can also listen to our other fine podcasts, Random Encounter about randomness, Rhythm Encounter about RPG music, finally making a comeback in 2021, and Phoenix Edge also making a comeback in 2021, weekly, mostly about current events. You can review Retro Encounter or those other 3 podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, however you are listening to us. Please listen, please give feedback. We love listeners and we love feedback. But listeners, how can you interact with us at a more individual level, starting with Alana?
You can reach me on Twitter at Alana Hagues, or you can find me on Discord as Alana.
And Eva.
You can find me on RPG Fan social media accounts, or you can find me on my personals as @EvoLise.
And Peter.
You can find me on Twitter at IHaveFury, or you can email me, peterT@rpgfan.com.
And last but not least, Zach.
You can email me at zachw@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Discord at zachw.
And actually last and actually the least, it's my turn. You can find me on social media at The Real Monsoon, on Twitter most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, and on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. And listeners, wait a second. There's a new challenger has entered the ring. All right, looks like that there's a 21st game that's going to be discussed next week, and that game is Devil May Cry 5. Thank you.
Hey.
Good night. Good luck. Pull my devil trigger.
子供なのね夢を追って傷ついて嘘が下手なくせに笑えない笑顔を見せた I love you もろくに言わない口下手でほんまに不器用なのにどうしてさよならは